Welcome back to Too Much Cowboy, a backtrack mini-series where I challenged 5 of the most talented media writers I know to have the most interesting conversation about the least remarkable Star Wars film, Solo: A Star Wars Story. This final episode breaks down the third act of the narrative and analyzes exactly what the ending of this story was trying to achieve. We also managed to offend basically every fan base from Star Trek all the way through to Harry Potter. Hey guys, welcome back to Backtrack Behind the Creators, official podcast of Zero Indent. My name is DC McNeill, author of Maynard Trig and editor-in-chief at Zero Indent. I am joined, as always, by the esteemed co-host of A Method to the Madness, Patrick Lovern. What's up, Pat?
Oh, not much, as usual.
Just esteeming about?
Just the what?
Esteeming about?
Oh, yeah, you know it, yeah.
Yeah. Love it. We're joined once again by the incredible Danielle from Level Story, longtime friend of the show. How's it going, Danielle?
Oh, it's going great. Excited to continue our discussion on Solo.
On Solo. You couldn't pay me to do anything else right now. And of course, it's Star Wars, so we have our 2 big Star Wars guns. We got Darth in the house. Hey, Darth man, what's up?
Hey, guys.
And of course, Rybold joining us once again.
Glad to be back.
So, where we left off last time, we were kind of just on the planet where we're going to go refine our coaxium. We were kind of talking a bit about the setup here for the third and final act of the movie and kind of drawing everything together. I think, Rye, you had something that you wanted to talk about with the world building of this planet. Savarine? What? Savarine?
Savarine, yes.
Savarine. So I thought we'd kick off there because that's the planet we've landed on is Savarine.
So, when I look at Savarine, I see a massive world building problem, and it goes all the way back to something we talked about. I think that Darth brought up in the first episode that we recorded, 2 or 3 months ago, and where you talked about shandification and verisimilitude. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, talking about the mud planet, I think.
Yeah, and exactly. And then I was thinking about this, and it just doesn't make sense to me. I was like, what? You take the first 3 questions of, I think, of shandification or verisimilitude is, what do they eat? Where do they sleep? What do they do? And I look at this, and it doesn't really make sense to me. So this is a refinery for coaxium. Do they have coaxium here? What are they refining? Because if the only place if they have coaxium here, which is why the refinery is here, then why do we go to Kessel? Why don't we just go here?
Or why isn't the refinery on Kessel?
Exactly.
Yeah. Huh.
And if maybe there was coaxium here, and if so, but there's no longer coaxium here, so if so, why is there still a refinery here? It would make sense if maybe they had to spin it up or something, but no, there's people on hand ready to go.
They're just waiting, yeah. And there's enough people there that locals running a bar or whatever for none of the visitors that are there.
Yeah, and there's a question that Beckett, he walks up to the bartender who doesn't reply because we're going to get to that later. But he says, what does he say? I wrote it down. I hear you make good brandy. And my first question is, out of what? It's a desert planet. I mean, I don't know what you make brandy from, but I know you make it out of something. So what is he making brandy out of?
Space grapes.
Space grapes?
Space grapes. Obviously, Rye, you haven't heard of space grapes? It makes the best space brandy.
Clearly, yes.
Yeah.
They have everything in space.
It's kind of like, I look at this planet and I see a lot of Exegol. They're the same problems that Exegol has.
Yes.
You look at it, you go, what are they? You ask these questions and it's just not readily apparent. It doesn't really make sense.
Do you think that, because thinking about this in context, right? When we were discussing the Mud Planet, we were discussing a little bit about the Mandalorian and how often it has to overcome this challenge due to the sheer volume of places we visit in the Star Wars universe in that TV program. But the way that it tells its stories is that each setting, whatever activity that we're doing there with Mando, is usually related to something that's making that world go round. So in the Water Planet, for instance, the activity we're doing is helping the Mandalorians jack this Imperial transport or what have you, or this Imperial gunship rather. because this is a water planet and mostly the way you get around is either by boat or by flying. And so it's kind of related. And like same with like the ice planet where it's like, okay, well, this is a pretty uninhabitable piece of like barren land. How does the ecosystem work here? Oh, there are these spider things and there's this and there's that. And you like each of the planets, like, oh, we got a Tatooine and we get to see how, you know, a town in the middle of Podunk nowhere Tatooine functions. You know, they have a sheriff and they have supplies, but there's also raiders and there's people trying to take what they have. And all of these things, like the story is related to the way that those places function. And Savareen is literally just a setting for where Dryden Voss's yacht needs to dock. Like this could just be an empty dock in the middle of space and it wouldn't make a difference to the plot. And that's probably not a good thing.
Well, I think the bigger plot there was not for Dryden Voss at all, but the whole point where we have this little village there was for Enfrey's Nest to give them the big tie-in to, oh, the big bad evil corporation is draining people dry. Here is the literal proof in front of you, and it's all these people without their tongues.
Right. But then how does
that's what I said. Like there's it all ties back together, but that leaves me with, again, more questions. Because like I said, the way that she tells the story, the Crimson Dawn was coming to get their coaxium. It wasn't just their, I guess, refined coaxium, but they had coaxium.
And presumably
now they don't.
Yeah,
and
well,
again, what are they still doing there?
But yeah, why are they still there? And is it because they don't have a way of getting off planet? And if so, how does it opens a bunch of questions that feel weird to be asking because it's the wrong place. What we should be caring about here is that these are oppressed people who have been oppressed by Crimson Dawn, who are looking for some get back, which is what's going to help us set up our double and triple crossing later. Not thinking about like, well, how do you buy how much does it cost to get, you know, a fare on a ship, you know, to a different planet? Like how expensive is it to travel in space? And if these guys are refining coaxium, surely they have enough nascent wealth. If there is coaxium here that they could afford to do that, and if it's all been taken by Crimson Dawn, then why is Crimson Dawn so eager for even more coaxium if that's a lot of coaxium? Like there's a horizontal alignment that doesn't really track either. But to your point about the bar, it's interesting because this is the second bar that we've been to in this movie, I think. No, I guess third if you count the inside of the yacht, because it's kind of like a club type thing. But this one is like, it's doing the very old school American novel thing of, you see a normal bar where it's like everything is like, you know, it's like a deliberately looking bar where you can go and get all your kinds of fancy drinks and different things. And then this bar is like, this is what poor people's bars look like. And it's very on the nose. Like it reminds me of every like Western movie where you go to the miners or the mudders, you know, bar, and they don't drink beer. They drink some like fortified cheap spirit that's made in like barrels or something. Like it has that energy to it without committing to any of the rest of the accoutrement of like letting us know how this place works. And also, why is there one bartender? Are there not other bar staff? Does the bartender sell drinks to the people who are subjugated?
It's the off season.
It's the off season. Oh, sorry.
You
should see it in summer.
Yeah.
Spring
really
break,
good.
man, this place goes off.
Yeah.
Now, it's an interesting thought, though,
Maybe.
Ryan. What could you see? What could you see the opportunities there? Like, what could they do different here, or what's your takeaway for us as we then set up the rest of this sequence?
Oh man, how to do that differently? I haven't really thought about, but there's just so many questions, and I want to be clear again that this is not a big deal, but it's something, and it's a question that jumps out at me, and then it's a question that jumps out at me which is not answered, which leads to other questions which are not answered, which leads to other questions which are not answered, and now I'm not in the movie anymore, and that's where things become problematic for me. But I mean, if somebody were to call this a nitpick, they would be right.
Well,
it's not. No, go ahead. No, go ahead.
So the bigger part for me that eventually I was going to do an entire video on is the fact that the fans aren't actually upset about the nitpick. The fans jump at stuff like this trying to dissect it because the directors, the writers, the creators, they didn't care to dissect it either. So the fact that these things, and this is not an isolated thing, it's all over the Disney Star Wars stuff, is that they have things that don't make sense that very easily could have made sense if they cared enough to put the effort in, which they so obviously didn't.
I think that is the key to all of this, is like, it's obvious to me that they didn't really care. Because I think about the amount of like energy and time I spend slaving over little details, right? I'm like, well, like I was having a thought the other day where I was like, okay, well, if they're in this particular location, they can't be eating like any kind of bird product, like fowl or like chicken or something, because of the location they're in. And it completely destroyed a scene I'd set up. And I was like, fuck, okay, well, I have to rethink about what are they, because they were cooking. There was a conversation that was transpiring in the book where two characters were cooking and talking. I was like, well, they can't be preparing fowl because there's no access to fowl here. So how do they get the fowl? Well, that's not going to work. So then I had to completely rework the scene because I realized that if I just left it in and been like, fuck it, doesn't matter, no one's going to notice. Like it does matter, and that little stuff is the thing that you slave over. And ironically, that's the stuff that Lucas was very interested in. That just doesn't seem to have carried through to the new creators.
Well, and it's weird because like it's not like film production is too complicated for you to have that level of prudence. You know, like in the MCU, they keep a track of like extras in movies so that they can hire them back to be the same, you know, background characters that they were in some other movie.
Yeah. And they do little things like clothing follows from movie to movie, like the jacket that Wanda wears in Avengers Age of Ultron is the leather jacket that Scarlet Widow was wearing in like one of the first movies, because it was just around the Avengers base and Wanda just picked it up and put it on.
Oh, that's
like
cool.
It was on the carrier. Like little details like that where like it doesn't matter, but you go, yeah, of course. And there's a shot where you see it in like, you know how they each have their own, like on the airship, they each have their own little container for their superhero costume in the locker room or whatever. Like you see that leather jacket just lying around, and then in one scene Wanda's not wearing a jacket, and the next scene it's gone and she's wearing it. And I went back and I was like, oh, that is that jacket. And like little things like that matter. They give you a sense of continuity, and that like in real life, everything is objects in space, and if you can track those objects in space, you get that sense of this being a real world and this having consequence. It's such a good point, Pat. I think that's where Star Wars is less. Although the ironic thing though is The Force Awakens is all about that, right? It's about Luke's saber, like this sword that he's lost.
Is it? I can't remember.
I mean,
is that like a central motif?
That right there, what you bring up is a big question that is in the script, in the original script and in the original shot or the initial leaked shot list. But it's the question of, well, wait a minute, where did this come from? The last time we saw it, it was tumbling in towards a gas planet. Mm-hmm. And it's a good question for another time. That's never answered.
That was for all the Rival fans out there. It was a little callback. Okay, yeah. So I completely agree, and I think to set up the rest of this episode, because what we're going to be talking about a lot here is the way that this movie comes together and forms a climax, and a lot of that is going to be to do with answering the question of like, what is this movie trying to say about the topics that it raises, and the way that movies resolve and the way that characters react to the topics in them is how we develop theme and how we understand theme. And so when Rye's talking about like it's yes, they're nitpicks. The problem is there's a lot of small things in this that don't work, which ultimately contribute to the whole not working. I think you can get away with little mistakes or little kind of shortcuts or sleight of hand, but there is just like, it's at every turn, it's like every location is plagued by the same problems. Like the same writing issues percolate through the rest of this movie, and are kind of Star Wars problems, not just this movie problems. And I think that's the context under which we're entering this kind of final piece, is to try and talk about the bit of the movie that I think we all like the most, which is this cool like cowboy standoff, triple double bluff, weird, just like heist film shenanigans, which is like really cool and fun.
I have one more thing. Sorry, before we
do it.
Before we get to Enfys showing up. So there's a part where Kira and Han. This is I think before they talk to the bartender. but where Kira and Han have a moment alone, and he wants her to go with him, and she says no, I have to stay with Dryden and everything, and she says everyone serves someone. That's one important line that she says, and then the next important bit is that he is adamant that he's an outlaw.
I have that written down here. I have that written on my notes too. Han smirks and replies, "I'm an outlaw."
Yeah, and he's an outlaw. So it's him saying, "I'm the guy who you remember at the beginning of A New Hope," and she's saying, "No, you're not. You're the guy at the end of A New Hope."
Yeah,
and then he says, "I'm definitely not the good guy. I'm a terrible person," in the most unconvincing delivery I've ever heard.
Yeah,
so I mean, I'm not sure quite what to think of that. Like, I just thought that little interaction was very interesting. Remember, we've talked about this before, how a big goal of this movie is to say that, here's Han. Here's Han origin story. How does he become who he is when we meet him in A New Hope? Because right now he is not that guy.
I suspect
and
the way that we're supposed to read that line, right? I think, and I don't know if this is how you read it, right, but I think the way we're supposed to read that is he's overcompensating because he thinks that Kira was in love with the guy back on the podunk, crime planet. And so he's trying to project that old version of himself and trying to convince her, no, I'm still the outlaw. I'm still the bad boy that you fell in love with all those years ago. Don't worry, I haven't changed that much. That was kind of how I read it.
I think that might be right, because I think maybe he misunderstands her reasoning for not wanting to go with him and wanting to stay with Dryden, because his initial response is, "Oh, you're with him," and she says, "No, I owe him."
Yeah.
And so, and I think she also says that she's done terrible things, which Dryden also says later, that you don't really know her, who she is now.
Yeah, you haven't seen the thing she has or something.
Yeah, and I think Beckett is trying to get the same thing across to him, that you don't know her anymore either.
Yeah, and they're both right.
Maybe that's what he's trying to do.
Yeah. I don't know. This is maybe a larger Star Wars question, so maybe, Darth, this is an arena that you could help chip into, because I'm going to speak from ignorance here. But, Kira's a new character, right? She's new for this movie?
Yeah, as far as I know.
Yeah. So that makes me think, they've got a lot of vertical movement they can do with her. She could end up being, if they did this trilogy, she could have ended up being, a really cool, evil... Oh, my God. She could have started as kind of a strong leader and then had a sudden turn and become very evil for no reason at the end.
Whoa. Yeah.
Whoa.
Someone should make a show out of that.
Someone should make a show out of that with dragons.
Well, a lot of the commentary that I've seen around this movie, and an interest in continuing the story into a trilogy, has been about her, because we already know where Han's going to end up, and might be interesting to see where he goes or what he goes through to get to that point. Mm-hmm. But I'm much more interested in her, because she's a completely new character.
Plus, she's hanging.
Well, I've also heard that her character, that Kira, was so when Lucas sold his everything to Disney, he gave them scripts for 7, 8, and 9, and they didn't have to use them, but he was like, as part of the deal, I'm going to give you these fairly fleshed out scripts, and the main character of that was a character named Kira, who was the female Jedi. And I don't know how much of that character they put into this version of Kira, but the names just are... I mean, it seems like they just took one and copy-pasted her from there to there. So it would be really interesting to see Lucas's original script, to see how much of that character was put into the Solo character, and how much of her arc over those 3 films may have happened or been planned to happen over the Solo trilogy.
See, that's interesting, because we know that this script was part of the deal, not the final version of it, but the pre-treatment was part of the deal with Disney. Because in my research for that first episode we did, it was glaringly obvious that part of the agreement was Lucas was going to supply them with a bunch of alternate non-sequel trilogy material. The sequel trilogy material was Lucas threw that in as a goodwill gesture. The rest of it was contractual. As part of the contract, they were like, we'll deliver you X number of scripts so you have future options. So I wonder, you might be right, because Kira became Rey in the sequel trilogy,
but the character's different enough. Like, they just visually look the same. If you've seen the concept art, they just have a visual similarity. I do wonder if Kira is the arc that we may have seen for a character like Rey, who starts off relatively well-meaning, kind of poor, and then is eventually seduced to the dark side and has to find their way back. Don't know. There's a lot of parallels, at least. I mean, well, I guess we'll talk about Kira at the end, because there's some pretty interesting stuff that happens with her. But does anybody have anything else before we get Emphas into the arena here? Well, so I'll set up this scene, and then I might hand to you, Darth, to give us some framework here. So,
Sorry.
you're right. Pat's just trying to kick the walls in.
Yeah.
So Emphas. Okay, so our heroes are at the bar and they're trying to decide what to do next. They're waiting for their coaxium to refine, I guess. And the ship kind of swoops in on the horizon and lands, and we get Emphas Nest and the Cloud Riders kind of walk out to meet our heroes in a kind of a Mexican standoff. We get a very classic Western framing where we get the shot of Han stepping into frame and we're looking through his legs with his hand on his blaster. Very classic, like Clint Eastwood type visual aesthetic here. And Emphas confronts our heroes and is like, "Listen, you can't take that coaxium. We need it. We tried to heist you one time. We're gonna have to take that from you. Very sorry." Han, like we kind of discussed last time, Han bluffs and he's like, "Listen, you don't want to do that. We've got a ship full of like 1,000 dudes down there. They're going to come out here. They're going to blast you all to bits." And then Lando immediately takes off, and Han steps back in line and shuts up. And Emphas reveals that, so she takes the helmet off at this stage, and I think it's supposed to be a twist. I'm not really sure what
Judging from the music, it seems like it.
The music cues and the camera movement make us think that her being kind of younger is a twist, but I never really thought about her age, so it done nothing for me here.
Yeah, no.
But she takes off her helmet and she's like, "Listen, listen, this planet has been fucked up by the Crimson Dawn. Look at all these poor people who are now, they took all the coaxium, they took all the wealth. We're going to get back at Crimson Dawn, we're going to get back at the Empire, and we need your coaxium to do it. You got to bloody help us out here." And that's kind of our setup, and now our heroes have to decide what they want to do about Dryden Voss and Emphas Nest, the Cloud Riders, and then this indigenous population who have been done over by both the Crimson Dawn and the Empire. So Darth, why don't you take us away with this rich tapestry?
Okay, so one of the points actually was directly what you just said about the mask, and it's something that annoyed a lot of people with Ben Solo when he takes off his mask for the first time, and that whole reveal is supposed to make you think he is scarred and he is gruesome looking, and then it turns out that he's the prettiest boy in all of Star Wars, right?
Yeah.
And then they did the same thing with her, and I just don't understand why the creators have this need to make us think that it is a scarred, disfigured person who is hiding their face because they're scarred and disfigured, and then it's supposed to be a big shock to the audience. Oh, they're not this ugly person. They're young, or they're pretty, or whatever. It just doesn't really make sense unless it's like we talked about before, where they're trying to artificially build tension in a really easy way instead of introducing something storyline-wise.
I mean, because that would work if Star Wars was a universe where things that were ugly or weird looking weren't accepted. But like, there are bars full of fucked up, weird looking shit all over the place that nobody seems to bat an eyelid at. So it doesn't even work in the world. Interesting you mentioned Kylo, because I have many gripes with the way that they handled that. Because up until the point where he takes the helmet off, he has this animalistic alienness to him. And he's like kind of scary. Like, like him stalking Rey through the forest. And, he's using the sound of the lightsaber to disorient her and stuff. That shit works for me 24/7. Like, it's so good. Especially after that opening sequence where he freezes that blaster. But, like, the whole way through, I'm like, damn, this guy's, like, going to be intimidating as hell. Like, he's going to do some crazy stuff. And then you're right, he takes off the helmet. And I'm like, oh, it's the guy from Girls. He's like, wait, what? Like, I was like, wait, what? What reveal was that supposed to be?
think it works a lot better with Adam Driver just because of what you were saying, how sinister Kylo Ren seems to be when he's in full costume. Then he takes off his helmet, and then I don't know. For me, he kind of has this like kind of innocent look to him, and he's kind of young. I don't know. I think you're meant to get the impression that like, oh, it's just some kid, and it's meant to contrast really heavily with what you've seen of him up until that point. Whereas I don't really. You see Enfys Nest like twice in this movie, and it doesn't really do anything.
Yeah, it'd be different if we had a main character who like had a helmet on the whole time, and then we had this reveal. It'd be like Mando, for instance. When you first see his face, you're like, oh yeah, it's Pedro Pascal.
Oh, it's Oberyn Martell, yeah.
Yeah, he's still very good looking.
So to me, the mask reveal was a lot more like up until this point, Enfys Nest has been not. I don't think she is the antagonist, but has been an antagonistic force.
Yeah.
For first in the Great Train robbery, and now here on Savareen, and so the mask reveal to me is like you have with the voice changer and the mask, you have all these preconceived notions that this is the antagonist and it's gonna do evil marauders, as Beckett says, and then she takes the mask off and it's this young girl, and you're like, wait a minute. So I think that's kind of like. Prepping you for or preparing you for the reveal that no, we're actually the good guys and you guys are working for the bad guys, but you should come over and work for us.
But that's also setting up the idea that we initially, like, our immediate reaction is to say that a young pretty girl is not the villain, when the whole point of at the end of this movie, the young pretty girl was the villain. I mean.
I have thoughts on that too, but I don't necessarily agree with that.
I guess if we're gonna be generous, I'm kind of okay. If we're gonna be generous, I can see that as intentional. So I could see them trying to go for that. It's a little saccharine to do that kind of thematic mirroring in that way, but yeah, I get what you're saying, Darth. From a conceptually, I could see that might have been their intention, which is like. Oh, look, this young woman, is doing this for all the right reasons, and she's not dangerous. She's the good guy. And then the one character whom we're familiar with, who is doing it for reasons that we care about, which is Han. She, is revealed to be duplicitous.
Well, something else that's interesting about the mask, which was a complete throwaway line, was she says something like, "When my mother survived and still wore the mask." So they're playing off the fact that this character, Enfys Nest, has been someone who has been fighting the Empire and fighting the bad guys for at least 2 generations. Mm-hmm. But it was only one sentence and never really focused on, and it just felt really weird as a throwaway sentence, number one. And as Raya's been talking about this whole time, it felt like it's something that could have been built up a lot throughout this entire thing.
Yeah, it's not You go, Ray.
No, go. Well, I was going to say, so the part of the twist, for me at least, is that did you know the sex of Enfys Nest beforehand?
No.
I thought it was a guy.
Okay.
I mean, that might be a bit sexist to me, but, my bad person voice changer sounds masculine. I'm thinking guy.
Yeah, the voice changer.
She takes the mask off and it's like, oh, it's a girl. Not only that, but it's a young girl. But like Darth said, the part about the mother, it's more, to me, it feels more like a what's the Princess Bride, Dread Pirate Roberts.
I was literally just thinking that. That was the point I was gonna make. Yeah, Dread Pirate Roberts, where it's like it could be anyone. Yeah, but do you think that gets conflated with the gender reveal, where it's like, because we don't know that Enfys Nest should be a particular gender or has been around for a long time, that unlike the Dread Pirate Roberts thing where you go like, suddenly everything makes sense. This doesn't have that same effect.
I was gonna say, if I think part of the gender reveal is that, well, let's say go to Darth's example. Let's say Enfys Nest takes the mask off and it's Adam Driver. Mm-hmm. Now, if the fact that it's Enfys Nest takes the mask off, and my preconceived notions of this character was it's going to be a guy, and probably because of the mask, maybe, as Darth said, grotesquely scarred or whatever. but none of my preconceived notions are correct. So maybe everything I think about this character is wrong. Whereas if it had been Adam Driver, who's not scarred and everything, but still male, I might not be in that position to accept that this maybe is not the antagonist that I thought it was.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. I think that's like right on the nose. Yeah, exactly. I don't understand why it's here. Like, what it doesn't. Yeah, the face reveal is in combination with revealing their mission and why they've been trying to take the coaxium. Right, they are one and the same in some ways. The movie is like, we are the good guys here. Look at us. We look like good guys. We have a bunch of diverse people. There's a dwarf. There's weirdly scarred people. There's some funny looking aliens. We're a bunch of kind of mismatched, kind of cobbled together team here. You like there is virtue signaling the movie is doing to let us know that these are the good guys. And like I don't know who mentioned it before. It might have been you, Darth. But like we talked about before, like we then get the reveal of like, oh well, they've cut out the tongues and this and that and like this oppression. But there are all of these signifiers to let us know that these are a marginalized group. And whilst yes, you need to code people that way, there is something kind of a little gross about the way that it's done. Sort of like it feels a little exploitive in some ways. But yeah, aside from that, does the reveal of them being the good guys, like as the setup for this conflict at the end, is there tension in that setup for you guys? Does that work as a proposition, being torn between Dryden Voss and these good guys?
The whole thing just didn't make sense to me at all. I mean, it was visually exciting and tense, at least the first time you saw it, but it just does not make sense that there was no build up to them suddenly deciding that they're not the bad guys anymore. Like, Enfries has been trying to kill them immediately, no second thoughts about it, yet now that they don't have guns drawn, are completely outnumbered, they're not immediately gunned down, and Enfries is like, oh yeah, let's sit down and talk about this, we're not really evil, we haven't been trying to kill you this whole time.
Also, haven't they killed a bunch of each other's own people, like during the train heist?
Yeah.
Isn't Enfries essentially responsible for like the death of Beckett's wife and the ship pilot Rio?
Great point.
Yeah.
And he's not pissed at all about it.
No, and our heroes killed a bunch of Cloud Riders with blasters.
I hadn't even thought about one of the things that Darth just said. Just made it click for me. Like, they don't have the coaxium. The villagers have it. It's going through the pipes right now.
Yeah.
So like Enfys could just be like, all right, we're gonna hold you at gunpoint and just take the stuff. I don't get it.
Also, the villagers are on Enfys's side, so couldn't they just trick? Like, there's so many options here. They could trick our heroes. Like, there's any number of ways to do this.
They just saw the goodness shining from Han. They're like, this guy, we want him.
I've seen his jacket. He's gonna be a hero.
I got something. Something just clicked for me. So like, because part of an extension of what I just said was that if their goal is the coaxium, then why would they give it to Han and Chewie and Kira to put it on the take the real coaxium to Dryden, which we haven't gotten to yet, but that's the plan. And if their goal is the coaxium, why are they okay with doing that? Why don't they just take the coaxium? Because they've already got it. And then it occurs to me that these are the villagers who were terrorized by Crimson Dawn. So maybe their goal is, we want the coaxium and we want to kill these people. And in that case, it makes sense.
Because we don't see the discussion they have. We cut away. We don't get to see the setup for this double, triple, twisty stuff. That all happens off screen. So what I think maybe the implication off screen is that was the agreement. It's like, hey, we'll get you the coaxium, but you have to help us take out Crimson Dawn. Like, that seems to be the agreement that they've made. Because that benefits everybody.
And Enfys and their group, they would be motivated to do that.
Yes. What benefits them, and it benefits Han and Kira, it sort of starts to track. And then you also get, like, if Kira's an apprentice of Maul, then it's like the Sith, you kill the Master, become the Master. Like, it sort of makes sense for a lot of what these characters are what their actual motivations are, all kind of line up to this as the plan. even if it's a very silly plan that has a lot of points of failure.
It does seem very contrived.
It's very complicated.
It follows. Everybody's maybe not acting perfectly logically, but it kind of makes sense.
Well,
It's good enough.
Yeah.
It's good enough movie logic.
Everybody behaves the way that the movie presents them as wanting to behave, or like is their nascent tendency. Beckett does all the things you would expect Beckett to do. Kira does all the Kira stuff. Han does all the Han stuff. Chewie is a dog. Just like classic Star Wars. You guys get it.
But there was I don't think we talked about this last time, but there was, oh man, I had a thought about Chewie. Right, it was like right after when I was thinking about what you said about the Chewie as a dog, and I said you can't talk about him like that because I've seen other people get jumped on, and I think it was the sequels, the sequel trilogy specifically, that not only does Rey inherit the Falcon, but she also inherits Chewbacca. Why doesn't Chewbacca inherit the Falcon? And it's like they're treating him like a pet, which he's not. And I was thinking about this might be the only movie where Chewbacca actually has sort of his own motivations. Does that make sense? Like when they're on Kessel and it's Chewie's working with Han to go get the stuff, and then he sees the Wookiees being tortured, and he's like, he goes to Han like, I gotta go. And then I think that might be the only time in the entire Star Wars saga that Chewie actually has his own thing going on.
You might be right.
Yeah, I think so.
I'm like running it through my head. I'm like, maybe the only other one is in the Clone Wars. Wait, is it the Clone Wars? No, it's in the
Rebels, probably.
Well, no, not Clone. I was thinking the movie. Sorry, Revenge of the Sith. I can never remember what the prequels are called. In Revenge of the Sith, Chewie helps Yoda escape Kashyyyk.
I totally forgot he was in the prequels.
Yeah, and the reason for that is because it benefits Chewie, because if the Empire finds Yoda there, then they'll kill all the remaining Wookiees. Like, there is a motivation for Chewbacca to do that is him. It benefits him.
That is one of my favorite scenes, by the way, because no one ever talks about how hilarious it is. Like, think back to the scene for a second. So Yoda lets his cane fall to the floor because he is feeling through the Force that all of the Jedi are being killed. 2 stormtroopers get the message over their comms so no one can hear it. They get it over their comms, Order 66, kill Yoda. So they come up behind him, raise their guns. Yoda senses it, leaps backwards, cuts off their heads. Chewbacca and Tarfor immediately grab Yoda and run. They don't care that he just assassinated 2 of his own guards. They are like, we are protecting this little green dude because he's our friend. Like, they have no idea that Order 66 happened. They are just trying to protect their little dude.
We could have jammed this tiny green man in a rocket ASAP. But no, yeah, that's Chewie's agency is a question, maybe for another time, because I think this movie is the most characterization he gets, and he feels like a real character. Like the fact that Beckett, has Chewie at gunpoint and it's a real threat, like that makes Chewie feel like an actual character to me. Where it's like, yeah, he's just one of the boys on the crew doing his thing. Like, yeah, he can be.
Even then, so much of that characterization was just thrown in because, like you guys have said before, they were just trying to do this checklist of all of this stuff. Like, he gets his what are they called? The bandoliers, the ammo straps across his chest that he always wears. Like, he gets those in this film, but if I recall correctly, he literally never picks up a gun and shoots a gun in the entire film. So why is he wearing this bandolier for ammo when he never has a gun?
Is it ammo? I thought it was like grenades or something.
Okay, he never throws a grenade. I mean,
Doesn't he?
whatever
he
it
does.
is,
No,
he never
Kira
uses
throws
it.
a shitload of grenades.
Oh, doesn't he somewhere in the sequel trilogy? I swear.
No, he and Han plant thermal detonators inside Starkiller Base right before Kylo runs Han through with a saber.
All right. Well, look, he just felt a little naked. He just wanted something.
He just wanted
All right.
something.
Yeah.
It's like pants. It's like Wookiee pants.
Yeah.
Maybe all the Wookiees have sashes.
It's like Worf's thing in Star Trek.
Yeah, yeah. It's Worf's little battle sash.
Yeah.
Fuck, Star Trek's good. Anyway, I miss Next Generation. Have you all seen that new Picard show?
Not yet.
I have not yet.
Okay, you probably don't need to.
Oh.
It's not very good. Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah, I have a friend who's very, very into Star Trek, and he was like,
Yeah, it was a bit meh to me.
I don't like it. He doesn't like it.
I think we've just committed one of the cardinal podcast sins, which is on a Star Wars show, we're talking about Star Trek. I think they're going to take my podcast license away for that one.
They might.
So we might have to bleep that out.
Yeah, but we were dissing on it, so that's okay. That's what we're supposed to do.
We were ragging on it, yeah. Fucking, it's silly. They don't even do anything. All they do is talk. It's for babies. I want the swords and fights. I'm a big boy. I like Star Wars. Okay, so let's set up the ending here. Does anybody have anything else before I kind of try and set up this weird heist cross thing?
The only thing that I have before the action kicks off is the interaction with Dryden, or between Dryden and Kira.
Between Dryden and okay, yeah, we'll get to that in a second.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I have one before we leave this, which was something that I've been thinking about more since Rye's been bringing it up, of how world building beforehand can set the stage for things to happen. And it got me to thinking, what are the odds that, as far as I could tell, this that planet, Severine, was the home planet of Enfries. At least her, maybe several of her cohorts, but at least her, that was her home planet. Was that the impression you guys got?
Yeah, more or less.
I think that's the kind of the impression, but at the same time, I was like, well, she still has her tongue, so she's definitely wasn't with these people.
The impression I got was that she was the generation that was under the ones whose tongues got cut out. That was whether or not that's true, but the whole point just goes back to what we had talked about earlier, of the coincidence that the only planet in the entire galaxy where you could refine coaxium under the radar happens to be the planet that Enfries is on, that they tracked them to. Like, the coincidences in this are just weird.
Yeah, and that can easily be solved by proving it's not a coincidence and being like, this is my home planet. Like, you could just do that. She could have been like, we were from here. But we, like it's easy. Instead it's left as a coincidence, instead of being a plot point, if you know what I mean. And this movie has plenty of coincidence already. But yeah, that's a good point.
Well, it would have made more sense for them to, like, they refine the coaxium on one planet and then get kidnapped from Enfries to go to another planet where they meet her home people who have been hurt by the bad guys. Like, that would make a lot more sense versus having them coincidentally be on the same planet. It just feels like very lazy world building.
Yeah, it's almost like they had one soundstage and they were like, okay, we have this beach that we can film on, and this soundstage, let's just reuse the beach a bunch.
Well, speaking of the beach, there's two things here again that when I'm watching these movies, and like this little question in the back of the analytical part of my brain, which shouldn't be saying anything, is like when a Beckett goes walking down the beach. I'm like, where is he going?
I thought that same thing. I thought that this time. I was rewatching it this week again, and I was like, where's he going? He doesn't have a ship. What? Like, the whole time I'm like, oh man, I don't want him to hurt Chewie. Those crates look really heavy, and then like the camera keeps panning, and all that's in front of them is more beach, and I'm like, wait a second, what? Does he have
I thought
exit strap?
Yeah, it's kind of like I had the same feeling on it was episode 7, Mandalorian, this season, when they let when Mayfeld at the end of the episode, and I'm like, where is he going? Did they give him any money? How does he get off this planet?
Yeah, he just goes, all right, I'm out of here. It's like, wait.
What? You can't give him a ride somewhere?
When he's surrounded by the enemy troopers too, like they're literally at their base, and the base is on high alert because they just blew everything up there.
It's
I mean,
like,
they killed a bunch of the native population too.
Yeah.
We could give you a ride, fam. Like, it's a big ship. Yes, Pat, is it time for an ad break?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. All right, we'll take a quick ad break, and then we'll kind of jump in to setting up the ending, and then we might jump in and talk a little bit about some of the reason the things we've been talking about, like these little nitpicks, are so prevalent when it comes to this movie and what genre this movie is trying to be. So we'll take a very quick break and then come back.
Hey guys, we don't have a sponsor for this last episode of Too Much Cowboy, so instead I thought I would take a minute to tell you a little bit about our Patreons and also thank them for their contribution. We couldn't make this show without them. Organizing something like this takes a tremendous amount of resources, from organizing and research to planning, juggling time zones to editing and recording and capturing, and all the equipment and time and resources and expertise that go into our shows take a lot of time and energy, and our Patreons help us to do that. Big shout outs to Yoop, Kumans, and Cameron, our two top Patreons. If you want to join them, you can head to patreon.com/zeroindent and help support us. We are an independent media publication. What that means is that we are 100% funded by the community or products and services that we sell ourselves. There is no one telling us what we can and can't say. We don't take advertising from external parties. We only advertise within our own network. So if you want to help make what we do possible and help us do more of it, you can head to patreon.com/zeroindent. Every dollar helps.
We're back. Hope you enjoyed those products or services. We had a great chat about Pokemon cards. It was excellent. What I want to talk about next is just like a few kind of things to tie together what Rye was discussing before and a lot of what we've been talking about as a setup for this last piece of the movie. So there's a question that we really haven't answered yet, and it's kind of a question that dwells at the heart of most of Star Wars, which is what genre is this movie specifically, right? Because Star Wars is fantasy set in like with the table setting of like sci-fi. But in these kinds of settings, there are a lot of questions that need to be answered, like we've been focused on a lot of the time. So like we shouldn't have to worry about a lot of the mechanics of this world. They should be easy for us to understand, and there should be markers and signifiers for us to kind of understand how certain things work. So for example, questions this film raised that I've just written down really quickly are: coaxium is starship fuel, which is great, but how do you get water in space? What about air? Is there oxygen on spaceships? Do they have like filters? Like you picking up oxygen cylinders? Are there oxygen masks in Star Wars? Because pilots sure wear them, and we've seen them used in the sequel trilogy, but there's never any spacesuits. So
Well, they always have like some sort of barrier whenever they have like ships that are.
yeah, there's like a shield.
Yeah. So I don't know. Don't think too hard.
Don't think about it.
Yeah.
But then
There's a really funny point about the water. Just while you're talking about it, I was looking in the visual dictionary for episode 7, and I think it was 7, but anyway, one of the sequels, and you know, a lot of the aliens are amphibious, right? So apparently, instead of just making those amphibious creatures walk around like normal people, they built like aqua tunnels in the spaceships. So there's literally tunnels full of water that these creatures can swim through around the spaceships instead of having to walk around and wear bubble domes or whatever.
what?
Yeah.
Why?
That was my reaction. That was my reaction when I read
That's
that.
insane.
I love that. That's fantastic.
That's so expensive. What a prohibitive design in your ship.
Unless it's
you know what,
part
that
of the unless it's part of like the water filtration system that they use to also let people drink, and maybe, but it definitely felt like it was thought of after the fact, because there was no hint of that in the movies whatsoever.
Yeah, I think A New Hope would have gone differently if instead of shooting into the exhaust vent, it was like shoot it into the swimming pipes for the fish people. Would have been a different kind of vibe. That's incredible. I thought you were going to say they drink their own recycled piss, Darth. I thought that's where we were going.
Well, I think in
That's
every
real
space film they actually
Yeah.
do.
Right. Yeah, I've seen that, the one with Matt Damon. He's up there on Mars having fun. Potatoes and whatnot. Another question that was raised by this movie specifically is so Han gets his blaster, which is like a broken down sniper rifle. What fuel does it use? Does he need ammo? Where do you buy blaster ammo? Is it battery powered? If so, do they need to charge it?
Yeah, you don't see him charging it
No.
when he goes to sleep every night.
he's got like a really jank lightning cable, so he's got to like plug it in and unplug it a few times,
Yeah.
and like wiggle it just to get the right angle. But you know, this film, we've discussed it before. This film centers resources in a way that no other Star Wars film does, and everything ends up needing this little hat tip explanation to the point where it sort of takes over when they don't do it. So, like, for example, like this movie sets up a bunch of stuff like, you know, why is the Falcon so uniquely fast and agile? Why can it navigate to places where the Imperials can't? But then we also do other things, like we find out where Han got his blaster. We find out where the dice came from. We find out how he got his ship. We find out what the Kessel Run was. It feels like this laundry list of Han Solo character creation plot points rather than its own actual story. And the two things I've written down here as comparison points are like Red Dead 2 or Rogue One, which are both prequels, where they explain like a single thing rather than a complete history. Red Dead 2 explains John's hat, ultimately. And it explains why he wears that hat and its legacy and why he wears it with every outfit he wears in that game, more or less. And so, like, as this story progresses, I'm left with the question of, like, what is the movie about? And the closest thing I could come to is, like, the topics it keeps bringing up is, like, thieving and, like, resourcing, all this stuff. And all of these things are centered. And so in some ways, it's about greed. In some ways, the topic of the movie is greed or, like, want or something. The greed of Voss, the greed of Beckett, the greed of Han.
The greed of Disney.
The greed of Disney. So we'll kind of talk a little bit about that as we get toward the end, and we try and understand like what it is this movie is trying to say about those topics. But as we alluded to before, Enfys basically bends Han's ear, and kind of off-screen-ish, we see a deal be struck between them. We do get the impression that Beckett is not too thrilled about this. Beckett's kind of like, look, if you want to double betray, you can kind of do it on your. I'm not fully sure this is a great idea, guys. Right? So he's on board, but he's not super on board. So we go into the Sky Yacht, and I can't remember if it was Rye or Darth, but you had a point about the interaction here with Kira. But essentially, we go in, and our heroes deliver the coaxium. Voss he's a little suspicious. He's like, something feels fishy here. And we have a bit of a back and forth where our heroes try and talk him down and try and convince him that nothing's wrong. And then, of course, we do get our confrontation where they open the coaxium, and Beckett realizes that Han is planning this backstab. And that's kind of the setup. Like, I'll probably leave it there because then we can talk about the outcome and everything after that. But yeah, did somebody have something about the interaction with Kira?
Well, let's refresh the details real quick right there. So Beckett leaves after Han talks about the betrayal, so we don't see him at all.
Yeah.
As soon as they arrive at Dryden Voss's ship, Voss has already been informed by Beckett. So from the very beginning, Voss is playing around with him. He is toying with him because he is angry. So he knows fully what's going on the entire time, and then eventually he opens the door and calls in Beckett, which is the reveal that they were betrayed, that Voss knew that they were quote-unquote fake coaxium that was delivered the whole time. Mm-hmm. So that's the full setup going into what Rye's going to be talking about.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so when Dryden is talking to Kira, he says, what did he say? I wrote it down here. What would you do if the person you trusted most in the world betrayed you? And she says, I would want to know why, if it was a moment of weakness or something else. And then I can't read my own writing here. And then I would ask the person to prove their loyalty by sacrificing something they love. Now, I was trying to think about them, like, what? There's something about that I thought was pretty interesting, and I was thinking, and this is where I said earlier that I kind of disagree with what Darth said about Kira being a villain. Actually, is I was thinking, is she foreshadowing what's going to happen at the end of the movie with that line? Because and that gets to her motivation later, but or her motivation at the end of the movie is that what she's doing? Is she sacrificing what she loves when she's leaving Han there? Like,
yeah,
because obviously it's kind of obvious that she has feelings for Han. She really likes Han. She believes in Han, but she is tied to Crimson Dawn forever now, and that it was to the question of I wrote it down. The other thing I wrote down here is she going to go see, oh God, what's his name? Darth Maul. Mm-hmm. Is she going to see Darth Maul at the end because is that what she wants to do, or is that what she needs to do?
I think this is where it gets interesting, right? So the character's needs and wants and the difference between them is where most stories take place, right? So Kira wants to stay with Han. She wants to be with him, and she wants to go and live the life of an outlaw with the sexy, swashbuckling Alden Ehrenreich. But what she needs to do is go and square her debt with Darth Maul. And what Han wants is to have a life with Kira and to help the fledgling rebellion. But what he needs to do is find his own way in the world with his companion Chewbacca. And so you raise an interesting point, which is to the question of, like, does that make sense for Kira? Is she talking about, she's not, because she's obviously setting up to betray Voss, right? So she's kind of doing this like double, triple, there's a few layers to it, but she's saying this, giving Voss the indication that she will sacrifice Han, right? What she's actually saying is, in order to go and pursue that need, which is to square things with Darth, or to go and pursue that angle, she's going to sacrifice being with him, not literally killing him. So it's kind of like, there's like the initial layer, and then there's the next layer above it, which is like the actual truth. As to whether either of them are emotionally resonant.
Well,
yeah.
The whole thing about the want and the need was that if she's sacrificing Han because she wanted to replace Dross Dross. That's Dryden Voss.
Dross.
She wanted to, if she wanted to replace him and move up the chain of Crimson Dawn, then yes, she is a villain. But if she's doing that, if she's sacrificing what she wants, which is to be with Han, to protect him, I think she keeps telling him you don't understand, or what's this thing? It's like you can't win this game. You stay in as long as you can.
Yeah.
And the only way that she knows that he's going to get away from Crimson Dawn is if she's there to sort of cover up everything that went down.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Because she lies to Maul at the end. It says, Beckett betrayed him, and never mind, he's dead. She doesn't tell him that.
Yeah, because Maul's like, hey, when you get here, we'll work out what to do with Beckett, and we'll work out what to do with his companions. And she's like, no, it was just Beckett. Like, he was the perpetrator. Yeah, it's interesting, but I don't know if it has the emotional resonance that the movie thinks it will.
No, I just thought I'm kind of with you there, but I just thought that line was interesting. I'm like, because if you read it that way, then that line foreshadows exactly what's going to happen with her at the end of the movie.
Yes.
What if it also wasn't foreshadowing? What if she, and I don't know if there was any visual indication that this is true, but what if she was actually saying that for Han's benefit, trying to give him a clue when he is days later trying to figure out why did she abandon me? And he was like, oh, wait, she said this, it didn't make sense. And she said, maybe she had to do this. Maybe this wasn't what she wanted to do. Maybe she had to leave me. Maybe she had to abandon me because of these lines of dialogue.
Yeah.
Well, that ties into the problem of, going back to the big problem of this movie, is how do we get this Han to be our Han?
Get 2 more movies.
Is this the event that does that to him?
Yeah. And the answer is
because I don't think it does.
Right?
Yes.
We can definitively say he is not the Han Solo of A New Hope at the end of this.
Can we?
Pretty confidently.
No.
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. No. I 100% agree with that. He's not Han Solo yet. I mean, I buy him as a younger version of that character, but he's not who we know in A New Hope yet.
Yeah.
Yeah, I suppose, like he is kind of a bit more jaded in A New Hope, I feel. Yeah. But going back to like the needs versus want thing, I feel like Han's want is to be a free agent, be the Han Solo he is in A New Hope, whereas his want is to be virtuous and to help the rebellion. Mm-hmm. So I feel like that kind of contrasts with like Kira's need and want, and I forgot what my point was, but yeah, something interesting there.
Yeah, it's sort of they're each other's foil in some way, where it's like he wants to do the good thing, but he needs to do some other shit. She needs to do the wrong thing and wants to do the right thing. And there is something about that I could see. I can see where this is going. I can see the 2 sequels to this, and I can see the 3-movie arc. I can see the way this is the first act of a 3-movie arc for these 2 characters.
Well, something else that's interesting, talking about the needs and wants of the characters. When you were talking about the overall theme of the film and how greed was a very big part of the theme, but when you dive down thematically to look at the characters, all of them, the main theme was freedom. Specifically, it's usually freedom from debt, but also frequently it's just the freedom to do whatever they want and having the money to enable them to have that freedom. So you could also look at Kira's betrayal as not just protecting Han, but she cannot have freedom until she becomes the leader of Crimson Dawn. That is the only thing that will ever utterly guarantee that she finally has freedom for the first time in her life. So we've got Han, who wants the freedom to go back and rescue her. Then he wants the freedom of having his own ship and to earn his own money and all this stuff. Chewie was needing his freedom to get out of the pit, freedom to go find his family. Beckett and Val wanted the freedom to go out and live their own happy life on the planet and have the time to learn his musical instrument. It's just all over the place. Initially, I was looking at it as they wanted more like monetarily, but the more that I looked at it, I think the overall theme was not necessarily around greed, but just freedom in general, which plays very well into the overall theme of Star Wars of the the bad army who is just this dictatorship that's taking away everyone's freedom.
Well, back in the very first one of these that we recorded, Danielle said something interesting. She said, "You said liberation, I believe," and that wasn't something that I had thought about. And you remember how I said that you set the tone right at the beginning of the movie with it's a heist movie. They're stealing something, and then throughout the movie they keep stealing things, and how I really liked that. And what she said about liberation, I went back and I looked at it. I'm like, yeah, that I could see that because everybody's trying to get out of something, and they're either trying to get out of something, or they're stealing something, or they're stealing something to get out of something. And then you have also Kira's line with Han before they go ask about the brandy, where she says, "Everyone serves someone."
Yeah.
Yes, which is everyone except Lando.
The true hero.
Lando is the true hero of this story and of my heart. Lando is
of Star Wars. End of Star.
And of
They
Star
don't beat they don't beat the final order if he doesn't gather the fleet.
That's true.
Lando is in this story the thing that Han wants to be. He is the thing that all of these characters want to be. He has freedom. He has a ship. He has wealth. He has capes. He's got it all, guys. He's got everything that he could possibly want, and he's the one who bugs out when things get tough. He's like, well, not my bag, sorry, I'm out of here, right?
Now, one interesting thing, though, is that he could have a rougher backstory, because if you'll recall, when they first hired him and they're trying to negotiate on the first, 25% cut, and he says, "Oh, you're Beckett, you killed so-and-so, I owed that person a lot of money." So we could actually see that he wasn't always this super rich dude. Like, he may have only been the super rich dude because the person he owed all the money to died, so he is able to keep that wealth.
Which seems to be the move, right? The move in this universe is kill the person whom has control over you, and that is how you obtain freedom. Or steal enough of their shit that you can buy your way out from under them.
And not just in this series, because the same thing with Jabba. It was literally kill the enslaver and you're free.
Yeah, which is an interesting kind of simplistic view of the systems at work that create slavery. It's interesting. Last time we the time before last, we talked about Fallout and the way that it kind of portrays world building and things like that. And Fallout has this issue with slavery in the same way that Star Wars does, where slavery always looks the same no matter where you go. And it doesn't matter what the context is. Slavery will always kind of happen if capitalism is around, and it's always an individual actor. It's always a bad actor who enacts the slavery. It's never a system that creates it. So in Dryden Voss's case, the reason Crimson Dawn is bad is because Dryden Voss is a bad dude doing bad things. The reason that this planet was conquered is because this guy wanted their resources and wanted to, knew how to oppress them. the reason the droids are subjugated is because they were needed for manual labor and they were designed for it, and they have these bolts or whatever. But like, the droids is the closest this story, any of these Star Wars stories, comes to painting slavery or this kind of version of slavery as a systematic issue rather than an individual one, to the point where, you know, when you get the Empire is driven by 2 individual actors, right? What are the bad guys called in the sequel trilogy? The New Order?
The First Order.
The First Order. Yeah. The New Order. The First Order is like driven by Snoke, Kylo, and the toffee. What's the orange head dude's name?
Husk.
Hux. H-U-X. Hux.
Yeah, that's right.
You know, again, like 3 individual actors ultimately responsible for the continuation and perpetration of these evils. And it's not until the last very bad Star Wars movie that becomes a larger picture, and it was some magic cloned bad guy the whole time. But like, for the most part, it's individual people doing bad things. Jabba has slaves because Jabba's a bad guy. Like, there's never an intimation that this is a systematic issue to do with the society or the finances or the Force. Like, there's no interrogation of the way that these systems actually develop. They are just like, here's a bad guy who's doing slavery, but here's a little twist you didn't see coming. He's a big slug man.
I mean, what you're describing is just like the quintessential difference between Star Wars and Star Trek, which is, you know,
Yes.
like Star Trek focuses on the systematic themes of like how people become, you know, who they are, and
Yes.
Star Wars is not concerned with that at all.
Not at all.
Would I be? I'm kind of scared to say this, but I've never watched Star Trek. Maybe I should be watching Star Trek.
I mean, yeah, neither have
sorry
I,
to say.
Danielle.
Okay.
You want to start with Enterprise. That's where it's at.
Yeah.
Okay.
Enterprise, and then
No, I'm kidding. I'm totally kidding.
no, Enterprise, and then Deep Space
Oh
Nine.
no, okay. Like, I literally know nothing. So.
You just watch Next Generation and you'll be fine.
Yeah, or Voyager. Voyager's also a good
Voyager's
place to
good.
start.
I quite liked bits of Discovery as well.
No, I'm also kidding about Voyager. I like it. My Star Trek buddy, who's a different guy than my Star Wars buddy, he makes fun of me for liking Voyager.
Interesting.
I believe among real Star Trek aficionados, it is very low. It's like the Attack of the Clones of the Star Trek universe.
Voyager
Yeah.
is Janeway, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
I freaking love that. What do people hate about it?
So many.
Oh, it's a
things.
very, very long. We could talk for like 2 years. We make a 2-year podcast about
that literally
things
like a
that are
2
not good in Voyager.
Deep Space Nine, in my opinion, is worse, but that's a really unpopular opinion.
What?
Listen, we can't do it now,
Oh my
guys. We
God.
can't do it now. We're talking about Star Wars.
I was gonna say, like, you're making the Star Wars people mad by talking about Star Trek, and you're just, oh my God, the Star Trek people are gonna hate this.
Yeah, I'm making enemies on every side.
Oh man.
I'm kind of the Sith of the podcast, if you know what I mean. Kind of the bad boy of the podcast, if you know what I mean.
Oh yeah, totally.
Kind of the
Don't
outlaw
worry, you'll
of
get
the
your
podcast.
You'll
in
get
some
your
ways.
redemption arc. Don't worry.
David, just remember, you're not the bad guy.
Adventures. You guys can hang out here and stay on this mud planet, and I'm gonna go out there, and I'm not staying on this moisture farm no more. I'm all of the characters.
Danielle, I've been waiting for David's redemption arc for like 3 years. It's
Hasn't happened.
Yeah, it's not
Wow.
coming.
No. I don't get redeemed. I just get more and more evil, and worse and worse.
Oh, I thought you said emo.
Yeah.
Sorry, you said
Oh.
evil. Yeah.
Hang on.
Yeah.
Why can't I hear you?
I had a
I've
thought
bumped
about
audio.
Solo,
Yeah.
which I think was what we were talking
Sorry,
about.
can you
Yes.
one of you talk? There we go. Now I can hear you.
All right, that movie. Yeah.
In my gestures, I unplugged my headphones. Yeah, let's talk about Solo, a Star Wars movie. Okay, we're at the end. It was basically what we've got is the reveal of Beckett is like, oh shit, now we're in trouble. And Han is pretending to get God, right? He's like, you bloody got us. Like, he sells it pretty well. And Voss signals, or there is a signal that is given to Voss's people outside who are going to go and subjugate Enfys Nest, right? Because Beckett has tipped them off. He's like, hey, these guys are out there. You got to go capture them. He's privy to the plan, presumably. And so all of Voss's elite kind of soldiers go up, and what they're going to do is they're going to capture or kill the Cloud Riders. And what we get is the reveal that they're not the Cloud Riders, it's the local population, and the Cloud Riders ambush this elite troop and take them out somehow, despite the fact that these are trained military personnel, and these are just like a bunch of bad rebels who aren't very good at their jobs, who couldn't even steal coaxium twice. And there's we get some cool Empress Nest action. She has a cool staff, little anti-gravity staff thing. But they take out the elite troop, and Voss suddenly realizes that Han's plan has gone off without a hitch. He's drawn out all the elite troops and taken them out, and suddenly Voss is basically defenseless. Beckett, with blaster in hand, shoots the remaining 3 guards in the room, and suddenly now has Kira, Voss, and Han and Chewbacca at gunpoint. And here, suddenly, everyone works out that Han actually does have the real coaxium with him this whole time, and that it was a double bluff or something.
I just can't help but remember that Rick and Morty episode when he's describing like his what do you call it? His heist film pitch,
Heist, yes.
And he's explaining it. But and then there's a double cross, but that was a part of the hero's plan the whole time, and so he double crosses the double cross, and then
He's like,
he's getting like disillusioned as he's talking about it. Yeah.
Yeah, that's exactly what this is.
But hey, man, I fucking love this shit.
It's so fun.
It's so good.
I really like it. Yeah, it's really cool. What do you guys think about Beckett just suddenly doing his own thing? How does that work for you guys?
I think that absolutely fits with his character.
Yeah.
On the one hand. On the other hand, he's been that moment absolutely fits with his character, I think. But on the other hand, he's the one who's kind of been like the whole movie, along with Kira, that you can't screw over Crimson Dawn. Mm-hmm. That they'll come after you.
Yeah, there were 2 things that really confused me there. One, that he just didn't, when he had the gun, Dryden Voss had nothing. Kill him, you got no problems from then on. You could just take the entire ship. But number 2, I do not understand, given his character and everything we've seen so far, why he left Han behind. Like, it just does not make sense.
Beckett, you mean?
Well, it makes sense in...
But he protected Han at every other opportunity, you know?
It's the same thing as it doesn't follow with his character, is that it does make sense, but it also doesn't. Because if he leaves everybody in there, they're going to be dealing with each other, and he can get away. Mm-hmm. But, so that's how it makes sense. But if he leaves everybody in there, somebody's going to win, and that person is going to come after him. So why, if he's the only one with the blaster in the room, which is what he says, his reason for shooting the guards, why doesn't he just kill everybody? And, as you said, take the ship.
Because he's like, he has the starkest, like, coldest interior to warm exterior ratio I've ever seen in a character.
It's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge.
So, he like, I suppose he does care about Han and them, but also not really enough to like leave them to die, and just makes no sense.
Who would you shoot? I'm thinking it through. If you had to shoot somebody else as well, so if you were like, to give you the best odds of getting away, right? Because you still want them to fight. I think you shoot Kira, because what I'm trying to do is like, if I'm Beckett and I want time to get away, the most reasonable, like Kira, and if I left Kira and Voss alive, they're likely to team up. If I leave Han and Kira alive, they're likely to team up. But if I leave Han and Voss alive, they're gonna duke it out while I get an opportunity to escape with my big dog and my coaxium.
But I feel like Voss would kill Han pretty quickly, and then Voss would be after Beckett pretty quickly.
So do you?
Or if Han somehow won that fight, he would also be coming after Beckett.
Yeah, but Han's easier to deal with than Voss's entire Crimson Dawn. Or is Crimson Dawn just this yacht? Is that the whole organization? Like, we don't know enough yet to really understand. Is Darth Maul part of Crimson Dawn? Like what? Like,
well, I it was my understanding that so she does the thing and she talks to she talks to Darth Maul. The implication is that Dryden Voss is not the top dog that, or actually no, because this is from, is it Rebels or Clone Wars? It's Clone Wars, I think. Where Darth Maul takes over like all the syndicates.
Yeah, I was about to say he's supposed to be. they haven't gone into it in the movies, and the movies supersede all other stories when it comes to what is officially canon. So technically we don't know, but he is supposed to be the leader of Crimson Dawn, and then I think also maybe a Black Sun and the other ones too, but he's at least supposed to be the leader of Crimson Dawn because Dryden Voss does say, you know who I report to. So like he definitely says, I am not the leader, someone else is the leader.
Okay.
Well, here's kind of a problem because if because I had forgotten that Darth Maul takes over everything. I thought he was just the leader of Crimson Dawn, but if he's the one who controls everything, he also controls the Pikes, which are the people that they stole the coaxium from.
Yeah, which is what they said though, which is that they never were going to be able to tell him where they got it from because they were stealing from allies. That was part of the original.
So they maybe never told Maul where they were getting it from without realizing maybe he owned both of them.
Of course, he's also going to hear, hey, our mine got broken into and a bunch of our coaxium is missing. You know, exactly this amount. Do you know where exactly this amount might have gone?
And he's like, huh, I have exactly that amount in my possession. I wonder if there's a correlation there. Yeah, this gets to the issue of like, this was clearly the first in a series of 3 films. And we don't have enough exposition to answer these questions.
Which kind of bothers me because I think that would make, if knowing that this was the first movie in a trilogy would make me like this movie so much more, because then it would be something to look forward to and maybe develop Han's character more so that eventually we get from point A to point B of what they kind of seem to want to happen at the end of this movie, which is get him to episode 4. Which is clearly not the case. So it just it's a little disappointing.
It is. Plus, we could have had 2 more films of Lando, and I'm here for that.
Yeah,
I'm so down
Kira,
for that.
and Kira, I wanted to see more Kira.
Yeah,
Me too. Yeah.
she would have. You know what? Give her a lightsaber. Let me see her cut some dudes up. Give me some violence, man. I want to see that shit. Okay, so right, Beckett takes Chewbacca. Well, sorry.
Do you want to do an ad break?
Oh, is it ad time? Yeah, let's do ad time. All right, we're going to take a quick ad break, and then we'll be back, and we'll talk about what happens next after Chewbacca and Beckett stroll up onto the beach there. So we'll take a quick break and be right back with you. Hey guys, we don't have a sponsor for this last episode of Too Much Cowboy, so instead I thought I would take a minute to tell you a little bit about our Patreons and also thank them for their contribution. We couldn't make this show without them. Organizing something like this takes a tremendous amount of resources, from organizing and research to planning, juggling time zones to editing and recording and capturing, and all the equipment and time and resources and expertise that go into our shows take a lot of time and energy, and our Patreons help us to do that. Big shout outs to Yoop, Kumans, and Cameron, our 2 top Patreons. If you want to join them, you can head to patreon.com/zeroindent and help support us. We are an independent media publication. What that means is that we are 100% funded by the community or products and services that we sell ourselves. There is no one telling us what we can and can't say. We don't take advertising from external parties. We only advertise within our own network. So if you want to help make what we do possible and help us do more of it, you can head to patreon.com/zeroindent. Every dollar helps. All right. So we're on the beach. Chewbacca and Beckett are out there. We cut back to our interior, and we have the second Beckett leaves the room. It's all hell breaks loose. Han goes for his blaster. Voss goes for his glowing knives, and Kira goes for a sword that's just laying around. And we get a pretty quick, tight little action sequence. It's really cool. Voss is using the environment to his advantage. Like, you know, he destroys a bottle with one of his knives, and it kind of showers into Han's face, so Han has to kind of block it. It's very scrappy, and like this thing's breaking, and you know, Han's trying to shoot him, and eventually Voss gets the upper hand. And as he does, Kira kind of intervenes and you know, knocks the blaster from Han's hand, and kind of has him at blade point. And you know, Voss kind of comes up behind Kira, and she's kind of got Han, and she's like, "Listen, you know, just like you taught me, You find your enemy's weakness and you exploit it. That's how you win the game, type of thing. And as she's got this to Han, you can see Voss kind of very smugly like, haha, look at what I've done. And she does a weird, like, very character cartoonish, like, pose with the sword as she's saying this. And then she turns around. And rather than killing him in one fell swoop, she just kind of like cuts. She turns around and she cuts at Dryden Voss's arm. And he kind of is like, oh, and he's surprised. And then she keeps going at him, overwhelms him, and just buries the sword into his chest, killing him. Because she, in fact, meant him, not Han. Twist again. So many twists. Yeah, and she kills Voss, and we get a little interaction between her and Han where she's like, listen, like, we need something to buy our ship. I'm going to stay here and collect some gems. You go after Chewbacca, and then we'll buy our ship and we'll fly off together. They make out a bit, and then Han leaves. And this is where we get our Darth Maul sequence. So then we learn that Kira was working for Maul, and she's on her way to Dathomir after this, in fact, rather than shacking up with Han and being in love and stuff. What do we think of this little sequence here?
I want to say that the end of that fight where she decides to turn on Han is one of the most like overly dramatic moments that never should have been written that way whatsoever, because like if the entire point was to surprise Dryden, why didn't she just stab him in the back while he was fighting Han instead of pretending confusing to stalk Han for that whole entire fight? Like it just didn't make sense unless her character just needed to have that moment where she surprised him and saw the surprise on his face when she turned on him and betrayed him. Like that was the only thing that made sense to me.
Well, I think it might be part of the positioning of where they are within the room is one thing, and then the other thing is that where they leave off at the beginning of the fight is he does not trust. He is against both of them, and so I think that's possibly why she's not in a position to do that. That's the only thing that I can think of, really.
Yeah.
Or the only things that I could think of.
Yeah, I could see that.
I mean, entirely aside from the fact that there are 3 dead troopers with blaster rifles that anybody could use as a weapon as well, just lying around on the floor.
Well, I think one thing about what Darth says about where she steps in is that based on everything that's happened up until this point in the movie, I'm watching this and I'm thinking there is a 1% chance that she does not turn around and swipe at what's his name back there.
Yeah.
But also, like we had talked about before, I think this was another of those one gun scenes where the guards literally didn't have guns. I think that they only had swords, and that's where Kira picked up her sword from. I could be completely wrong about that. But that also ties in with Snoke, because his guards also literally don't have blasters. They all have some kind of sword melee weapon for some reason.
They might have, because remember, Beckett shoots both of them and says, I prefer to be the only one who's holding a blaster. So they might have blasters. Because before he shoots the guards, they're about to kill Han, and the guard pulls out a sword and brandishes it menacingly or whatever, letting us know that it's there.
And because it lets us, the audience, know that there's a sword in the room. And also I think the implication is like that Voss might force Kira to ceremoniously kill Han type of thing. Like as she was saying, like sacrifice something you love. There's a few things that we could talk about here that maybe like serve for a better day, but I think this resolution is just interesting. So Dryden Voss is dead, and Han goes after Beckett to save Chewbacca and to get this coaxium. I got the sense just from the way that Kira was acting that scene that she knew she wasn't going with him when she said goodbye. And like Han is you can see Han try to convince himself that she's going to go with him, and that she is in fact right behind him. But whether or not he actually convinces himself is another thing entirely. But the way that those two actors do that moment is quite understated and quite subtle, I think. I don't know if that was just me or if everybody else thought it was very cheesy. I don't know.
I didn't think much of it, to be honest.
That you knew before she left that she was going to leave?
Yeah.
I don't recall how I felt about that. But, I mean, I was thinking the same thing about when they go in to see Dryden the first time, and he's like, yeah, show me this stuff. Show it to me. You know, like, yeah, it looks so real. And I don't recall if, knowing how the whole movie plays out now, if I read that in the way that, like, he totally knows what's happening, or if the very first time that I watched it, I picked up on that. I couldn't say.
Yeah.
I think probably, because it is a little bit exaggerated.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's part of it, though, is the exaggeration kind of works because this is the dramatic tone of this movie in some ways. So, okay, we now get Han pursuing Beckett on the beach.
Well, hold on. Let's back up just a sec before we get there, because you just talked about the entire reason that she is staying behind was to gather up the diamonds or whatever, right?
Yeah.
So I know we have said this, but I cannot get my mind around the fact that they are sitting on a $1 billion yacht saying we don't have a ship, we need money for a ship, while they're standing on a ship. Yes,
And if she grabbed the diamonds, where are they going to go?
What's the plan, guys?
What?
It does.
What is down this beach? What's down there?
Where is Beckett going? He's going to the little ring of rocks where it's going to be a flat plateau for a shootout, is where he's going. That's his whole plan. Beckett's. He's not going anywhere.
It feels like this movie is just going through the motions. Like, they want the characters to go to a certain place, so they're gonna go there, and there's no, why. It just is. They're going to this place. It doesn't think about, oh, we're on a ship, we could take this ship.
We could sell this ship. It's probably worth a lot of money.
Which is an interesting lead-in to something that I want to talk about for another time, but the way that some people write story is looking at the end goal and then trying to work backwards to get there. So the biggest example I have is Rian Johnson and how they designed the Mega Destroyer in the beginning of The Last Jedi, the one that is like a little Death Star and can destroy half of a planet with one shot. And if you look at the design of it, it has an incredibly flat top that just has a bunch of turrets all over the top of it. It's almost like a normal Star Destroyer, but way flatter on the top. It looks fairly unique in that aspect. And when you look at the behind the scenes stuff, and the animators were talking about how they built it and designed it and everything, and they said when they were showing Ryan models, and he was saying, no, it has to be flat. It has to be flat. It has to have this super flat top so we could have this scene. So when he was designing, he was working backwards. He was saying, I need to have a scene where I have an X-Wing, one X-Wing, run over the top of the Star Destroyer, destroy the turrets. For that to happen, I need to have it designed this way. So he's working backwards from his end goal instead of working... I mean, you shouldn't always be looking at all those little details when you're designing something, but you should be doing world building along the way. But a lot of directors seem like they start at the end goal and then work backwards. So they never care where Tobias is walking to, because that's not the point. The point is the interaction that he's walking towards. It doesn't matter, for them to think about all those little details.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. Yeah, it's getting characters where we've talked about it before. It's in service of the audience instead of the characters in service of themselves, like real people are. Like, people do things for reasons. Characters in this story very often do things because the plot needs them to be somewhere or to do a thing. And this is exactly that.
It's like when you finish a trailing mission and then Beckett just becomes a regular NPC and he just
he just walks off. Yeah, exactly. It's funny because in video games, at least, like, if a character's walking to somewhere, it has to be a place because you can see where he's going. Like, you have in video games, you could be like, well, there's nothing over there. So, like, they'd have to be like, okay, we'll have to put another spaceship here. Like, something. Yeah, but I swear in Assassin's Creed, like, after you finish the mission, they just, like, walk around aimlessly. Like, because, I'm a pretty bored guy. I just followed, like, one of the main characters once just to see where he went. He just went nowhere.
Just kept going in circles.
That's so funny.
Yeah.
See, like with Red Dead 2, when you do that and you like finish a mission for someone and you follow them, you can just like follow their entire life as they go about their business.
Oh, that's cool.
Like, and they have routines and stuff. Like they'll go to the pub in the afternoon and then, you know, they'll go and camp and like cook and get into a bar fight. It's just like a very, like, they do that well. This is like the exact opposite where it's like, who the fuck knows where he's going? But you know what? The film doesn't care.
Do you know the game Oblivion? Elder Scrolls
yes.
4?
Yeah.
Characters, that's how a lot of characters are. Like I did a lot of modding in that game. Okay. And so I dove into all the different the what the characters are supposed to be doing, like, I don't know, on this day, or like if you actually go and look on the wiki for this, like if you like, you might need to go find this guy for this particular quest on this day.
Yes.
This is the routine he follows. But it's different from how it is on this day.
I remember that,
which is when he does this.
Yeah.
And then this day, he leaves town and goes across the map and goes and does this other thing.
Yeah.
So you probably want to do this quest fairly early because he might get killed.
Yes. I remember all of that. And or you'd be like, okay, well, but okay, it's the in-game Sunday, and he's not going to be there till Tuesday. So if I go here and do this now, I can catch him before he does that. And you have to, like, because characters will also tell you, they're like, oh yeah, I'm pretty sure, like, in the afternoons on weekdays, you can find him at that tavern, and you're like, okay, cool, that's my lead, and you go there and you talk to people. It's like the D&D style. It's like Gygaxian storytelling. Then you go to that tavern and he's not there, and you ask someone, you're like, oh well, on Fridays actually he goes to to visit the grave of his dead wife. So you go to the graveyard, and then you find him there. Like, it's that kind of noting of story where things start to make sense because people have lives.
What storytelling did you say?
Gygaxian, the guy who invented Dungeons and Dragons, Gary Gygax.
Right.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. That's a discussion for another
Yeah,
day.
I'll
It's
incorporate that into my vocabulary.
a whole mode of narrative storytelling. But yeah, absolutely right. That's what this is missing, is that sense that these people are doing things in a real place. It's what we've been talking about the whole time, ultimately.
Way to bring that back. That was good.
Thank you. Thank you. Does anybody have anything else before we can talk about who shot first? Or
that's the very next thing on my notes here.
so
yes.
yes.
5 seconds before that. Okay, so we talked about how Beckett was walking out into the middle of nowhere, right?
Yeah.
If you look at that scene, the ship is behind him in the background, so he's walking away from the casino ship, right?
Yep.
Han is in front of him.
Oh,
How
I
did-
noticed that this time. Yeah.
How did
he
Han
get
teleport
there so
there?
quick?
No
So
ship or
quickly.
anything. Yeah.
And how did he do it not being seen? It's a big open beach. Surely Beckett would have seen it
Well,
coming.
so here's the thing about like that kind of thing is like I look at that and I see it and then I kind of like dismiss it, like it's one of those things, your brain sees it, it's a question, you're kind of like doesn't really work, but whatever.
Yeah, the only reason
that's-
the only reason it bothered me was it goes back to the directors not caring enough to just put a speeder bike behind him. That's all it would have taken,
Well, there's a thing that so I've been reading about like directors like Spielberg, Hitchcock, Scorsese, and like a lot of times, and there's little things like that where they're like, the audience is not going to care, and it's a thing, we've thought about it, we're not going to deal with it because at the end of the day the audience won't care, and that's true sometimes, but and like in this particular instance, like I said, like I thought about it, it sticks out to me, but I don't really care that much. But if this is like item number 52 in the movie for you, you're probably not in the story at this point and going, how did he get there? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, you're
and
right.
That's what you're thinking about and not what's about to happen.
Yeah, it's not that there's an issue with it. It's that it because that's the thing. It's cumulative. Because if there are a ton of other things that, because you do have to do that, right? Because of economies, right? So I'm thinking about like, because I work in prose, like I have a certain number of words I can put on a page, and like after a while, if you include too many things in the scene, it slows down the pacing, or it gets distracting, or it's impossible to follow. It's like you have an economy of what you can and can't do, so you do pick and choose. You're like, people aren't going to care about that, but this will help with this, and this will help with that. I think where this falls down is because it's the climax of the movie and the climax of these two characters, we're paying a lot of attention to what's happening, or I was at least, to Like, because so much of the setup of the last 20 minutes before this moment was about logistics of who was where and doing what and where the coaxium is. Like, the movie is calling our attention to the geography of objects and people for the specific reason that it's a heist movie. They're trying to heist something. They're stealing objects. Characters are taking an object from a location to another location. So my brain's already in geography mode because I'm trying to track the double and triple crossing and all that stuff. And so that's, for me at least, why it flags as, like, why I noticed it particularly. Whereas I think normally what you're saying, Rye, is like how my brain would normally work, which is like it would just kind of flicker past. I'd be like, it doesn't matter. It's cool. Like, the shot's cool when it pans across and it's just Han with like his hands on his hips, being like, here I bloody am. I'm like, it's cool. It looks cool. It's a cool shot. But yeah, I think it's because the movie at that point is concerned with geography and objects in space that's why it drew me out of it, if that makes sense. Okay, so let's talk about who shot first. So Beckett, so Han confronts Beckett and he's like, listen, I've done it. And Beckett goes, dude, you're a fucking idiot. You really think she's going with you? And Han's like, you don't know what you're talking about. And Beckett says, she killed Voss, didn't she? And Han doesn't really give him a response. But this is Beckett reading Han incredibly well, where he's predicting what's going to happen. He's trying to find a weakness here. He's trying to stall, get Han emotional long enough so he can get to his blaster and shoot, right? This is the move. This is the classic Beckett move. And Han sees this coming, fortunately for Han. And Beckett is winding up, and he's like, you know what? You're a good kid, but you've still got a lot to learn. You know what? The final lesson, and before he can deliver his final mentor speech, obviously, he's twisting the role of the mentor to suit his own needs. Han just shoots him. Just bang. And Beckett is surprised. He's like, damn, okay, you finally made a smart call. Trust no one. He's been saying it the whole time. Han has finally learned his lesson. Shoots him. Beckett goes down, and we have a bit of like a father-son bonding moment where Beckett's like, you did learn, you were better than me. You surpassed, the student becomes the master type thing, and then Beckett passes away, and we are left with our heroes have the coaxium, which they do the thing that they said they would do with, which is they give it to the good guys, and then they get a little vial for themselves so they can go off and buy a ship. And we'll talk about the epilogue in a second. But yeah, who wants to start with who shot first thing?
So okay, the trope in cowboy movies of waiting for the other guy to reach for his pistol first, so that when you kill him because you're just better, it's a noble kill, right? Because you were going to get shot anyway. So, and then the reason they revised that in that weird edit in A New Hope where they made it look like Greedo shot first, it was to make Han look more noble,
to be less of a bad guy.
Yeah. So and then this is like, the Star Wars being like, no, look, guys, we're with you, we're one of you, the fans. We know that Han shot first. Anyway, it's a weird spin on that trope, and it suits the movie, like and like it's a climax of like the lessons that Han has been learning throughout this movie, but in the larger context of like the meaning of that trope, it's weird.
Yeah, it is weird. That trope, though, it's interesting you bring it up because in real life, so like in movies, that is how cowboys work. In real life, the reason that you did that is if your pistol was still in the holster and someone is drawing on you, you can get out of the way and then pull iron. So like you can drop to the ground and then pull your gun out, right? It's like a tactical reason to wait for them to start pulling because you know that if you're quicker, you can kill them because if you're doing this, you're not moving sideways. So I'm gesturing this. If you're watching the video, it helps. But like if you're pulling the gun out of the holster, it's harder to move laterally, right? Because you have to pull up and then pull out. So if someone's starting to do that and you know you're a quicker draw, you can just kill them straight away. Whereas if they haven't drawn yet, they can get out of the way and then pull and shoot you, and they've already moved around. It's harder to shoot a moving target. So there are like logistical reasons why you should shoot first, or wait till they're drawing their gun and then you shoot them if you're a quicker draw. That's what dueling came from. And movies did a really cool thing where it became like an honor thing, and which I kind of like, where it's like, it's legal to kill someone in a duel, which is like, yeah, but like not in cowboy times, like way earlier in England. But yeah,
That's an interesting throwback to Hamilton there when they're having their duels and they're like, let's go have it in New Jersey. Everything's legal in New Jersey.
everything's legal in New Jersey. Yeah. I always think of
That's
that
great.
that sequence in Dishonored 2 where like your target, maybe it's the first Dishonored, where one of your targets, like you can trick them into sliding your honor at a party, and then you can like kill them in a duel and no one cares. Like you just shoot the dude in broad daylight, and if you follow the rules of the duel and do it honorably, no one gives a shit. It's a cool little moment. Yeah, talk to me about this scene, Rye. I know that you had some notes.
Well, I think what he just said about, well, first of all, I should say I think it's a really great scene, but a really great scene.
I really
but
like it.
The
Like a lot.
the first thing is that it feels like he said it feels too meta. They're like, oh, he shot first. Oh yeah, you remember how he shoots first? He shot first there.
I remember.
But even though, again, I think it's a really
That's like
great scene.
I do recall.
So the second, I think, problem or issue with this, and I don't know that I would do it differently, but the second sort of issue with this is that this needs to happen separate from Kira because she needs to leave and everything. And it kind of needs to be his moment with Beckett and sort of Chewbacca in the background, but his moment with Beckett. But he's already shown that he's been paying attention and learning from Beckett in the previous scene where it's like, well, we knew that you were going to double cross our double cross, so we're double crossing your double cross of us.
Yeah.
And so he's already shown that he's been paying attention and he's out and he's learned the lessons that Beckett's been trying to tell him. So that kind of takes away a little bit from this scene, but I still really, really like it. And going back to that liberation theme, Beckett's also trying to get out and go play the Valicord or go to learn to play the Valicord or whatever. And he has a great, little line there. It's like, I really would have liked to have done that or whatever.
So an interesting thing that I noted was that one single line from Beckett right after he's shot completely ruins Han's character. And if that line were taken out, Han could have been sort of transformed into that character we see in episode 4. So the first thing that Beckett says is, you were right to shoot me, I was going to kill you. Like, Disney made it absolutely clear that Han is not a bad guy, he was defending himself. And that's the entire point of the Han shot first controversy in the first place, was that Han was not supposed to be a good guy who was defending himself. He was supposed to be the bad guy who shot first because he's a bad guy. But now when Disney recreated the scene, they again have it just blatantly said, you're not the bad guy, you had to do this because I was going to kill you. If they had left that one line out, and then Beckett says the thing about, I just wanted to learn to play the Valicord, now you're feeling controversial about this. You're like, why did Han shoot him? And now Han is transported into that character that he is in episode 4, where he is the bad guy who shoots first, and you don't know if it was the right decision or not.
He gets to become the tragic hero.
I see where you're going with that. I don't think I agree completely. Or rather, I disagree a bit in that I think the whole thing that Beckett's trying to get across to him is that, you're the good guy, you don't have what it takes, or I don't know if he goes that far, but it's sort of the implication that Han is not yet who he needs to be. He needs to get hard. And Beckett, I guess, with him showing, that this is sort of like the final lesson, as in, like, Beckett knows he's done. It was like, yeah, you did the right thing, as in, if you did the quote unquote good thing and waited for me to draw, then I would have got you or whatever. But no, you need to do. You were right to do the wrong thing. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So, like, you need to shoot first before the other guy draws.
Yeah.
So I that is my take on that. I don't read it as. I could see what you're saying, but I don't read it specifically as them trying to excuse Han or make it. I don't know the words I'm looking for, but I still feel that Beckett is sympathetic in that moment, and that you feel that, like, Han is not really too happy about having to do what he did.
Yeah, I mean, I think both readings make sense. Like, the text is vague enough with what Yeah, you're right, because it depends what you think Beckett means by the right thing as well. I really fucking like this scene, guys. It's really cool. It's just really, it's really well shot. My only gripe is that we see the direct blaster hit, and you don't really, like, it's hard to, like, blasters for the most part, when they hit people, they're hitting stormtroopers, so their armor kind of breaks, so they just fall over. We don't really know what blaster damage looks like. You know, Kylo gets hit in his belt, and we can't see it. Like, Beckett just has, like, a little burn on his shirt or whatever, which I didn't want anything gruesome, but like it would look like it was a weird wound is all. Like it was weird to look at. But otherwise, fucking love it. I love the cowboy shit, like the standoff. I love the little moment of intimacy they have as Beckett's dying. But more than that, I love the exact moment that happens after this, which is it's now just Han and Chewbacca, and we see Kira's yacht, you know, flying off into the distance. And Chewbacca puts a hand on Han's shoulder, and they just stand there and watch her leave together. And it is a silent, like, perfect moment of everything that these two characters need to say to each other goes unsaid because it doesn't need to be said. And it's just two people together mourning the tragedy of everything that's just happened. It's very, very good. I really like that shot and this little sequence here.
Restrained almost, if you will.
Very restrained.
Like
yeah. Very, very restrained. In a way that is, you know, benefiting the movie in so many ways. Because you can imagine them doing a comedic rejoinder here where Chewie says something in Shriwalk or something or whatever it is. You can imagine a different version of this that is less good.
I imagine they had like maybe someone from Pixar Studios that day, and he was like, "What if they just don't say anything? What if you just do visual storytelling?"
Yeah.
And Ron Howard was like,
"What if we showed instead of told?" Ron Howard was like, "Whoa, you can do that?"
"But I'm literally a narrator. That doesn't compute."
You know what would have been really interesting at this point is to actually have Han chase the ship just running on foot for a period of time, and then eventually realize I have lost her, and he gives up, and you see that on his face, which ties in very well to him not wanting to attach himself emotionally to anyone in future movies and stuff, because you could see that period where he is still trying to physically chase something that he knows he cannot reach.
Well, and I wonder if that would have been...
I think you're right, because he lacks surprise that she's doing this.
Yeah.
Which I think kind of removes some of the impact of this is a transformative moment for the character, or it should be. And I think that, like as you said, because he reacts the way that he does, it's it loses some of that.
I suspect he hasn't learned his lesson yet, because his lesson is to come in the follow-ups. Like, he's going to chase Kira, and it's going to make things worse. And then he's going to have to learn that lesson eventually, which is what will harden him into the Han in A New Hope. But that, of course, does not transpire. But
there is a moment as she's going away where we get a shot of her and then a shot of them at the beach and then a different angle of her that makes me think back to what I was saying earlier, that she's I don't read that as her doing this to serve herself. I mean, it does serve her character, but she's doing this because she knows she has to. There's no other way for her to solve this problem. That it is a sacrifice for her to do what she's doing.
It also could just go back to the what I talked about is one theme was just everyone trying to do their best to survive, and she might think that she has a better chance at surviving long term going off on her own, staying with Crimson Dawn in that leadership role versus going off with Han, which will assumedly Maul will find out that she abandoned him and took up with Han, so that is the more dangerous route to take. So this could easily just be the choice of this is the best thing that she could do to stay alive the longest, which has, again, just been a running theme.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. All right, well, we might take a quick break because I know Pat needs to duck out, and then we might come back and talk about the little epilogue of this movie. It'll be a little cheeky quick ending here, and then we'll kind of summarize our thoughts. Is there anything you wanted to add before you duck out, Pat?
Was there anything? I guess just speaking to the end real quick when he's like, yeah, there's there's a crime lord on Tatooine, that's looking for getting a crew together for a big job, which is Jabba the Hutt, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. That's the only thing that seems it's weird that they were intending to make more movies out of this, because that seems like just such a nice bow on this movie as a solo adventure and as a prequel for like A New Hope. So
It does. What you got to remember is they wanted to explain everything, Pat.
yeah.
So
yeah.
they want you to hit A New Hope and be like, I know exactly the job that Han went on that means he owes Jabba money. And I want to see every second of it. Like that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're right. This is in the way that it is now, it is quite a nice dovetail into that film.
It is. But yeah, that's all I had.
Awesome.
Did we fully talk about deep in the fakes and art versus imitation and all that stuff?
We didn't really even get into it. That might be a conversation for another day then. That we might get back together on. We could even do an epilogue to this at some point, but yeah, let's take a quick ad break and then we'll come back. Pat's got to go. We'll come back. We'll talk about the ending of the film and wrap up this series, and then maybe explore. Yeah, we might do something in the future with that, because I think there's some other stuff we could talk about with the sequel trilogy as well.
I'm telling you, this is a solo podcast.
This is a solo
that you've got on
podcast
your
now.
hands.
I'm going to do this till we die.
Right.
Which will be forever. Awesome. All right. Well, we'll catch you guys right after these products and services to talk about the epilogue and the ending of this movie. Hey guys, Pat's headed off and we don't have any ad reads for this week, so instead I thought I would drop in a little clip from his podcast, A Method to the Madness. It is a movie and philosophy podcast where once a month, Patrick and his co-host Mitchie break down an interesting, complex movie and talk about just what makes it work and try and relate it to a bit of philosophy and a bit of film theory. If that sounds like the kind of thing you'd enjoy, and if you like this show, trust me, you will, you can find A Method to the Madness everywhere you find podcasts or attm.com. You can also find it on zeroindent.com. I highly encourage you to listen, and here's a little snippet. See what you think.
I don't know if I really kind of got it at all the first time. I was very confused. And it's not like Inception, you kind of... That's probably the second most confusing now, this being the top one, Tenet. And Inception, though, at least you understood the underlying plot for the whole movie. And there were bits and pieces that were confusing, like, is Cobb in a dream or not? Or, like, things like that. But overall, the general plot is, like, you get it. Like, they're going into dreams and they're trying to install that memory into old mate's brain. And, like they're just in a mission and it's in a brain, but in a dream, sorry. But like in Tenet, I just was literally confused. Like I didn't know what was going on.
All right, we are back from that little break there. Pat has taken off, so we're just going to talk about the ending of the film here and the epilogue. So essentially what we're up to now is that we're still on Savareen, and we're going to cut away to what happens next. So Han and Chewbacca go to talk to Empress Ness, and she's like, "Thank you for all of the coaxium that we've got. Do you want to join our rebellion?" Right? So she's like, "Do you want to come and be part of this thing?" And Han and Chewie share this look, like this just silent look, and Han kind of, he doesn't say much. He just looks at Chewie, looks at Empress Ness for a minute, and he just shakes his head. She's like, "Oh, maybe one day you'll change your mind." And he says, "Don't count on it." But she does give him a vial of coaxium, which is going to be enough for him to get off the planet and go and find himself a ship. So once again, Han is back where he started with nothing but a single vial of coaxium and his friend Chewbacca. And so he goes to a tropical kind of forest-looking planet where he finds Lando Calrissian playing another game of Sabacc. This time, Han beats Lando because he takes Lando's kind of the card that Lando has up his sleeve, and he wins the Falcon. And that, as Pat said, we kind of end the movie with them heading off to Tatooine. Who wants to start where with all of that? What have we got?
A huge throwback that Han never had to actually deliver on the fake ship that he lost to Lando in their first game. So he really didn't deserve to end up with the Falcon in the first place, because he bet an imaginary ship, lost it, and then never had to actually pay up that bet.
Right. I was thinking the same thing.
Or pay Lando's share of the heist, because there never was a share of the heist.
Yeah.
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 Huh. Man, Lando's a generous dude. Or
Really,
an idiot.
he
or an
really
idiot.
is.
Who could say?
Or
Yeah,
You threaten somebody with Chewie ripping their arms off, they'll probably be pretty amenable.
That's
yeah,
fair.
having Chewie around is a real good deterrent in general. I'd be doing basically whatever Han wants. Chewie's terrifying. You all seen that deleted scene where Chewie rips off the dude's arms in one
In
of the
our plug.
sequels?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a crazy little scene
No.
that they cut out.
Which,
Yeah.
He does that in this movie too, when they're robbing the place. And he rips one of the guards' arms
yeah, he does, too.
off, and Han's like, "That would have fit me perfectly. You had to do it that."
Oh,
directly."
yeah.
That's right.
Yep.
That's just Chewie's combat move. That's one of his specials.
Yeah, he's holding the arms. He sort of shrugs. He's like, whatever.
that was
Not my
actually a
problem.
gripe that I have with, what is it, Return of the Jedi. When they are on the barge and Chewie is out there with them fighting, and we have had all of this build-up since Episode 4 of how, strong Wookiees are and how fearsome they are in battle and everything, and you never actually see it. And that barge scene would have been the perfect spot to show off the Wookiees' strength in battle. And I just don't know why they didn't go with it.
I think it had to be a Luke hero show. Like, we had to see Luke Skywalker, the Jedi.
Yeah.
It was a Luke bonanza from start to finish, that whole sequence.
Well, you're also talking about the same fight that has the Force.
Yeah.
kill.
God, yeah. Oh boy. My favorite thing is watching the behind the scenes of that and watching watching Mark Hamill with the lightsaber hilt and the stick or whatever, and he's hitting people so hard that the stick bit is snapping off, and they have to rotoscope it out in post. It's so funny. Like he's just like going in like it's like too much. Like the stunt coordinator's like, Jesus, Mark, like back off a little bit, man. Yeah. Okay. So this is an ending, right? So Han, we've been talking a lot about the Han of this movie versus the Han we meet in A New Hope. He doesn't join the rebels, but he does give them the coaxium. So he's essentially like doing the minimum he can to be a good guy here, but he's not fully committing because he wants to go off and have his adventures and win the Falcon and do this or that. How does that work for you guys as a kind of a little emotional like kind of footnote to this story?
Not very well. It it goes back to what I've been saying this whole time. That I don't really buy it.
Yeah, at most, I
And-
think he should have given them a third. Given them some small fraction. Like, if you feel bad, if you're a moral person, give him something. But I don't see any way, with his backstory, as rough as it was, that he would give away that much of his freedom. Because, again, it's not just the money. It's that he is buying his freedom and his ship and all that.
Mm-hmm.
'Cause it's just like the conversation he has with Kira, where he's like, "I'm an outlaw. No, I'm a terrible person." I'm like, "No, you're not.
You're not. You're a pretty
Not-
decent
no, you're
guy.
not. You've done nothing in this movie to make me think that."
If anything, you've done the opposite the whole time.
Exactly.
Where it's like everything you've done is like, you're a good dude.
Actually, one thing that's kind of sneaky that we talked about before was the value of the coaxium. So, you know how we talked about when he first gets the vial and he's talking with Kira and she says this is worth 500 to 600. Then they get up to the guard gate and they say this is worth 800. Now, when at the end of the movie, when Han is going and he's gonna do this sabacc game with Lando, and he says this vial of coax is worth 10,000 at least. So we've gone from 500 to 600 to 800. Now it's all the way valued up to 10,000, and it's the same one vial.
I mean, is that technically character growth for Han that he's getting better at lying, or is Lando just really dumb and doesn't know how much coaxium's worth?
Or alternatively, there's some insane inflation in this.
Yeah.
There you go.
Or maybe because it's like from the source of coaxium on Kessel, it's like better and more expensive. Like it's like premium fuel instead of just like regular unleaded type thing.
And I've been paying a lot of attention to the whole GameStop and Reddit thing, and I was like, did all the Reddit people find out about coax, so they're just like pumping all their money into it, so the stock price is just shooting through the roof? And
Supply and demand, baby. That's just economies.
Yeah, Palpatine's trying to short coax. Yeah.
Oh no! Now he pissed off Reddit. Who haven't we upset in this series? Yeah,
Twitter.
This ending doesn't work for me either for a few reasons. I think the emotional little like the Han Chewie moment on the beach works for me. I agree with what you guys said that could have been better. We could have seen more of a reaction from Han. But like as far as this is a resolution to him, to the story, like him going back to Lando and getting the Falcon, like it doesn't really do anything for us. Like there's no what I would normally expect in this kind of epilogue is that we learn something about Han or something about the world or something about what is going on that we didn't previously, that recontextualizes some of what's just happened. So an example would be in a Marvel movie, you watch the film and you have your ending, and then you have your after credits sequence that, you know, slightly recontextualizes something or hints at what's to come or something. Some of them in that universe are pretty hacky and like cliche. But what they should do if they're really good is like they tell you just like a little bit more about the world, right? Or like a little bit more about what's going on. So like the best example is at the end of I think it's the second Hulk movie. Tony Stark turns up in a bar to talk to Bruce Banner. He's like, "Hey, listen, I know who you are. SHIELD sent me." And that's enough. You're like, "Oh, hang on, there's something else at play here." Like you get enough, there's enough oomph there where you're like, "Okay, this is changing the context of what we're dealing with here." And so I think equally with this movie, the way that it does this little epilogue, this doesn't like tell us anything new. There's no new information provided to us here. There's no new character movement. This is just, I guess they get a ship and Han stops Lando from cheating. Do you know what I mean? Like it doesn't necessarily do anything new. I'm not sure if I'm explaining that terribly well.
Oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, you go.
I was just going to say it's kind of like the thing that I don't like about epilogues or really post-credit scenes in general, just because like I don't mind like a post-credit scene where it maybe will introduce something that's not like too important. Like it just feels like a bunch of tacked on stuff that they couldn't bother to actually do in the movie. Like, and I know like he couldn't have gotten the Falcon like beforehand, like that makes sense, but like that would have been kind of cool to actually see that earlier in the movie. Like it just feels tacked on. It just feels like we needed another movie, I guess.
Yeah.
And that's kind of why I don't like epilogues in general. No, I didn't dislike the scenes. They don't really fit in the movie, and that's why I don't like them within the movie. Yeah, I guess.
Totally.
No, I agree. He should be getting the Falcon either the next movie or the movie after that.
Yeah.
Which maybe was the original plan, you know?
One interesting thing that goes back, I want to say it was Rye that was talking about when Han first meets Kira on the barge. The entire first half of the movie was all about Han's motivation was, I need to get back to her. So when he achieves that, what is the entire rest of the thing about? And at the end of the movie, we come back to the same exact problem. The whole thing has been building up to Han wanting to spend the rest of his life with her. And then thematically, the ending doesn't make sense because he and Chewie seem to be just going off happy-go-lucky, oh, we're going to have a great rest of our lives, but he just lost what he's spent the last X number of years fighting tooth and nail for. He lost the only thing that he cared about, and he's smiling, walking off into the sunset. It doesn't fit the mood.
Yeah, he should, you know, get the Falcon. Like, let's say we keep that, right? He still gets the Falcon, and then he's like, okay, Chewie, we're going after her. Like, we need to go track her down. And it could have been like, you know, it could have been like kind of like, that's almost like a darker ending where it's like, actually, he's not letting this go, you know, like he's hanging on to this.
Especially think what that would have been amazing for the confrontation between him and Lando, because then it's not just Han like randomly wanting the ship, and it's not just him having this passive aggressive thing with Lando. It's like, I need that ship because it's one of the best ones out there, and I need to get Kira. Like, if you put that motivation behind what Han is doing, it makes it so much more powerful of a scene than it actually was.
Yeah, if he was looking for her, if that was still his goal, instead of being like, hey, let's go find out what's going on Tatooine, like Beckett said, yeah, it's very different.
And I think that's where, for so much of this film and for so much of the way the story is told, it just misses a lot of... And, like, obviously, it's easy to rewrite in retrospect, like, oh, we would have done it this way, would have done it that way. But a lot of it isn't necessarily that the pieces aren't there. They're just never used to the fullest extent. And it feels... This movie feels like a first draft in so many ways, which is ironic given it's filled with reshoots and is a second draft of the original. Like, there is something about that which is just disappointing to me as a piece of, like, art. Like, this should have the opposite problem. It should be, like, finely tuned, right? The screws should be really tight everywhere. And I guess, for me, so much of this movie is kind of these dopey, slightly misfired moments where we start with the Han who kind of... He's sort of an impression of the Han that we know in A New Hope. He's not different enough. He doesn't really learn anything in this movie, right? His quest doesn't, kind of give him a new worldview, right? He doesn't really, like, discover the ills of, like, imperialism or the Empire. He doesn't learn to let Kira go. He doesn't learn to trust himself or trust Chewie or that he should trust no one. Like, ultimately, his lesson is that, like, imperialism is kind of fine and the Empire is kind of fine as long as the good guys get the oil. And the good guys are always the minority. So, like, that morality in this world is solved. And I don't know, in my opinion, like, instead of this emotional kind of treatise of, like, how did this lying street rat become this hustler with a heart of gold, we start where we end and go nowhere the whole time. I think that is my largest issue with this story.
You kind of just made me think of something, and that's going back to the scene on Savareen when we're looking at the village and being told about the backstory of how these people were tortured or whatever. And why did we need this entire scene, this entire explanation to prove to the audience that Crimson Dawn was evil?
Yeah. I think because we already have an evil entity, like we have the Empire. So it's like, well, trust me, these guys are also bad. They're just different bad.
But we don't
That's
really
kinda
see
how that
the
felt.
Empire. Pretty much the only evil we see was Dryden Voss blatantly killing the governor. And I think that's really the only evil that we see as far as that faction is concerned. But I don't know. I mean, I know that...
Well, and Enfys Nest does specifically say that she wants the coaxium to begin a rebellion, and that Crimson Dawn and the Empire are intertwined. They are, at least to her, one and the same.
Yes.
But it was like they needed to show that they needed to show the pain and the suffering in order to prove that the rebellion needed to happen.
It's almost like, and I noticed this a lot in just movies in general, but they always seem to be trying to say, oh, we're gonna have like this dark backstory for either a group of people or one person, and they're really trying to make you care about something, and they're really trying to drill it into your head that you have to feel a certain way about something. And that's kind of the vibe I got from that, just because, like, what was the point of that, like, at the end of the day? I mean, it's just it keeps drilling an idea into our head, but it doesn't give us any more information. They could have taken that out and done some other stuff that maybe would have served the film better. And that's just the vibe. Like, again, Hollywood does that a lot, and that's what it feels like. Like, the people who made this movie didn't really seem to care enough to actually put that time and energy into writing into specifics. Instead, they're just like, oh, well, we'll put this scene in here and we're just going to remind them that thing bad.
Yeah, it goes back to
the vibes I got.
Yeah.
The only thing that I can think of, I'm trying to put the words together to how to say this. That we're talking about the reveal of the Crimson Dawn cutting off everybody's tongues, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So right just before this, we've had the antagonistic force be revealed to actually not be a bad person. So they say. And they want the coaxium for quote unquote good reasons, or we know about, A New Hope and the rebellion and everything, so we know that what she's talking about, but the characters don't know that. And we're also, I think we need to, not only does it need to be convincing that the characters Han and Kira and etc. would be like, okay, I buy what this person's selling me, that they want the coaxium for a good reason, and that the Crimson Dawn, these people, this sort of neutral third party, though they're not a neutral third party, is an example of what they want to fight against. I think if Enfys Nest just showed up and said, "Hey, I'm not a bad person. I want the coaxium for a rebellion," I don't think that would work for the audience, and I don't think that would work for the characters either.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah.
I'm not, that being said, I'm not fully, I do think, I'm not fully 100% behind that inclusion either.
It's a lot to do with the execution of the concepts. So much of this film is just like the idea is fine, but how it's used is never quite hitting the mark. And I think that's a good example of...
Well, that's your byline for the whole movie.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Because remember, I like this movie, and it's fine.
Correct.
It's fine.
Exactly. Yeah, it's fine. And that's why I feel like I did like the movie. At the end of the day, it was an enjoyable movie. But I feel like you just said, it was fine.
Mm.
It was interesting, that description that Daniel gave of Hollywood going back and giving really tragic backstories, and they don't always make sense. My first thought was, I don't know if it's the last season of Doctor Who, but the Lost Child, I think, was the episode. They go back and basically make the Doctor like he was a tragic villain the whole time, kind of. It was one of the weirdest character rewrites I've ever seen, and I think everyone pretty much hated it, and no one could figure out why they even did it in the first place. And I don't know, we could probably do a whole session just on that topic.
Whole... Dude, yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I think I know the answer because I've tuned my brain into the dunce that thinks he's smart wavelength of Chris Chibnall, but we should talk about that at a different time. Yeah, but it's exactly the same thing where it's like you're architecting this like dark backstory because the character you've written doesn't have enough depth on screen. And so instead of writing them better or making them more interesting, you force complexity through recontextualization instead of through action. Characters are the difference between what they say and what they do. And so this activity of creating these dark, gritty backstories, right? I'm thinking about the number of Disney movies that are like, oh, it's this fairy tale, but from the villain's perspective. All of that shit is exactly the same thing, where it's like, how do we make this thing interesting without having the impetus of telling an original, fresh story with unique activity and action? The safer option is to recontextualize the existing attributes, and you're always playing in this safe space because you know how it ends, you know where that character's going.
But it's not just that, it's also telling and not showing.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's all of the worst parts of storytelling. It's why doing prequels is so fucking difficult in general.
Well, yeah. Well, I was gonna say, and too, like, it's very easy to fall into that, and that kind of goes to your point, David, about this feeling like a first draft as well. Like, I could totally see someone writing, this type of thing as a first draft and saying, hey, you need to just flesh this out a little bit, bring this more, make this a little more complex. This is a little surface level here. That's just the nature of writing,
Yeah. And when that's why you need editors and people that don't just say yes, and you need structures in place to make sure that you're, using a complementary array of theory and practical and like a bunch of other things. I mean, now at the end of this series, I'm just going to piss off some Harry Potter fans because there's a fan base I haven't touched yet. But like Joe Rowling is like a good example where she is the king of this like lazy, constant recontextualization in the absence of... She's realized that her books aren't very good. and she's trying to add depth and complexity in retrospect outside of the text, which is not how books work. But then if you go and read her other stuff that was published under other pen names, they all have exactly the same problems as Harry Potter, just in like a noir setting, right? It's exactly the same storytelling issues. Star Wars, this movie, is a perfect embodiment of that kind of tendency where it's like, if Joe was to write a prequel to those stories about, say, like Dumbledore or something, what she would do is identify a series of objects or things that are mentioned about Dumbledore, and then tell a story where each of those things is addressed as a laundry list, in the same way that Solo is, in the same way that Doctor Who under Stephen Moffat's run was obsessed with trying to explain every little mystery of this universe and this character, because we mentioned, remember, it's like, okay, you remember in the Empty Child episodes, he mentioned the weapon factories on Villengard, and then at the very last episode of his run as showrunner, they go to Villengard, because you remember it, it's a reference. Like, just this tendency of like nothing can just be, everything has to be milked for as much content as it can in the safest way possible, instead of just telling good stories. And that is why I worry about, that's why we do this shit. Like, that's why media criticism is important, because Disney have all of the money in the world, and one part of them, and one part of Marvel is doing really interesting, cool stuff and still telling good stories, and like they're pulpy in their action or whatever, but they're trying really hard. Star Wars is like big budget, lots happening, but they all kind of feel written by committee in some ways, and they never feel like they're properly trying. It's like what you were saying, Danielle. Like, they just don't. They're not committed to good storytelling. They're committed to spectacle and to profitability. I think it goes back to what we talked about in the first part of this whole series, which is like the Eigen mentality of, our job here is to make event, and it is to make money. And in doing, and in making event, and in making money, we will reliably, eventually, make good art. But good art is not the motivator. Good art is the byproduct.
Yeah.
One interesting comparison when you were talking about all that was one episode of Community where pretty much the whole series of Community is taking place in this one community college, right? They pretty rarely go outside of it, but there is one episode where they reference all of these adventures that they've had in other places. They talk about how they went to this old cowboy town. They talk about how they went to this haunted mansion type of thing. They make all of these other references, and each reference is only like 10 seconds or something. It gives you a little hint about their lives outside, about all these other adventures that they've had, and like life lessons they may have learned along the way, but they don't go out of their way to explain it. In fact, it's like the exact opposite mentality. It's like, we want to tell you there is more, and we're never going to explain any of it.
Yeah. And crucially in that too, they're all references to things we haven't seen. Yeah. Like, none of them are like, it's not references to previous episodes.
Yeah.
Because it's setting up a punchline about Britta and Jeff that we don't know is a punchline because we weren't at those other events. Yeah, it's very, very clever. And you're right, it's the exact opposite. That is Dan Harmon making fun of all of this shit. That's Dan Harmon being like, fuck you and your safe storytelling, fuck you and your tendencies to do this shit. That's not how good stories work. I mean, Community and Rick and Morty are like, ostensibly, it's Harmon just doing what he does best, which is telling good stories and making fun of everybody else for telling bad ones. But that's a really good example, Darth. Like, that's a great example of someone keying into this issue and then surfacing it and being like, you can still do this stuff really well with fresh material. You don't need to rely on not everything needs to be a gritty reboot or a callback. Things can be new and interesting still. And you can work with the material you have and do interesting story.
And as a side note, I just want to point out, I was talking to my friends the other day that I have adored the fact that as part of this podcast, any reference I make, you guys know what I'm talking about. And understand the backstory of it. Like, I could be trying to come up with a word, and Raya's like, "Oh yeah, shandification. That's what you're looking for." Like, this has been very
tuned into the
enjoyable.
same wavelength.
Yeah.
Yes. I've seen Community many times. It's a very good TV program. Well, look, we should probably wrap things up here. We've gone on for a minute here. Does anybody have any closing thoughts they want to add, or anything else they want to kind of touch on before we dip out here?
I've got a few. I can go through them like really rapid fire because some of them are just short and funny. Ryan, do you have anything you want to talk about first?
The only thing that I would say is that I think the job that this movie has, which we've said a number of times, is that it needs to take this new character, Han Solo, and transform him into the character that we know in New Hope. If it doesn't do that over 3 movies, and it does not do that in a convincing way. And so in that way, it's not that great. And then we've also talked about the execution of everything else. But at the end of the day, it's a heist movie, and it's fun, and I like it, and it mostly works.
Yeah,
mostly.
Mm-hmm. I like the outfits a lot.
Yes,
I like
capes.
The capes are very good.
Capes especially.
Capes are primo. I concur with all of that. Darth, what have you got?
Okay, so this is just kind of a bunch of little funny and or interesting things that I noticed along the way. One, if you look where Beckett got shot, I'm pretty sure that it was like under his heart-ish, so at the very least he should have had a collapsed lung. It didn't really bother me that he wasn't talking like he had a collapsed lung, but it would have added a lot of realism to the scene if they were like, okay, where did he get shot, and what is the physical reaction to where he got shot for the character. That could have been really interesting for them to look at. Another thing was jumping back to when Kira meets Han, and then the two of them meet Voss for the first time. And Kira immediately says, "This is Han, this is our backstory together." She comes clean immediately, and the implications of that was just really interesting. It shows, like, she does not keep secrets from Voss no matter what, which I guess is an interesting tie-in to later on when she is trying to keep secrets from him about betraying him. To show at the very beginning, she kept absolutely nothing from him. Talking about Han understanding Shriwook, we have one scene where he has trouble speaking, but he's able to understand everything. Never in the rest of the movie does that happen again. It would have added a lot of realism. It would have been a really good world-building thing for him to occasionally say, "Chewie, I didn't understand that, you have to slow down," or "Chewie, I didn't recognize that word." Something like that. Like, I can understand Spanish if you speak slow and you use not many complicated words, but even then, I'm not going to understand what you're saying most of the time. And that translated very much into how I saw Han and Chewie talking to each other, and it could have been world building for the future, because in episode 4 and onwards, he understands Chewie very, very well. It could have been really interesting at the beginning. He barely understands anything Chewie says, and it causes a lot of problems with the communication between the two of them. It may have been more trouble than it's worth to put that in, but it could have been an interesting character building thing along the way.
Definitely.
For Rio, who was the four-armed little dude that got shot. So
Yeah.
when the enemy Cloud Rider comes in and Rio pulls 2 guns up and shoots kind of like over his shoulder, it's interesting if you notice he actually closes one eye to properly line up the shot, which is interesting because he has 2 different guns, so he can't really line up one eye between the 2 guns, but still. It reminded me of a scene when, in episode 7, when Rey gets the gun from Han and she's practicing shooting. Just watch that scene. When she first aims down the barrel, she doesn't know which eye to close because she's never held a gun before. So you see her close like her right eye, and she moves the gun back and forth trying to figure out which eye she's supposed to aim down the barrel on. So
it's the same eye that is in the gun hand.
Yeah.
Doing the experiment now.
But
That's really fucking weird. Oh no, I think that's... Isn't it dominant eye
It's supposed
thing?
to be the dominant eye, yeah.
But it was just a really interesting throwback. I was like, oh, they had him close the proper eye to aim, whereas with Rey, they also kind of had her experiment with which eye is supposed to be the proper eye.
That's a nice little...
Well, that one is in particular is I've seen that cited a lot on her thing, and I went and I looked up a bunch of gun stuff afterwards. This was like, is that true? And it's that she closes the right eye and uses the left eye to look down the barrel of the gun that she's holding with her right hand, and she has to shift in order to look down the barrel of the gun. And according to everything that I've seen, that's correct, because you're supposed to be using the dominant eye. And Daisy is, I believe, or left oriented or whatever.
Yeah.
Although
I
an
think so.
interesting note that as far as shooting goes, as far as pistols go, a lot of the time you want to practice with your eyes open because generally with pistols it's more of a not necessarily close quarters, but it's close enough where you might have multiple opponents, especially if we're talking home invasion or stuff. You do not want to have your left eye closed because you're sighting down the right. Then you have someone coming at you from your left. So generally, to my understanding, you are actually training how to shoot with both eyes open, and the one eye closed thing is much more of a distance shooting thing, coming from shooting rifles and that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's if you're shooting at a target.
Yeah, the point of those moments is to be clear that Ray has not handled this kind of thing.
Yeah, I didn't really have a problem with it. That was just a really interesting thing that they threw in there.
There's a slickness with Han that Beckett chucks him deconstructs that sniper and chucks him the modified pistol, and Han just immediately knows how to use it.
He was a soldier, so that does make sense, I suppose.
That's what I mean, though. There is congruency there.
Yeah.
Throughout the series in a way that's quite good. Even you've got Obi-Wan using that blaster when he shoots Grievous. He closes one eye to do it as well for the initial shot, and then he just opens his eyes and blasts him.
The only other thing I had was just a really funny thought that the guards on the train, when they're robbing the train, the actual guards who are there have magnetic boots so that when the train turns sideways, they don't get thrown off.
Yeah.
Think a minute about the core strength that those guys have, because they are attached by their ankles and still staying upright when the train turns sideways.
Because our team are using they've got little pulley rope things attached, little grapple hooks attached to their belt. But yeah, you're right. That's crazy. Unless it's some kind of a gravity field that's around them. I'm sure there's a visual dictionary explanation for that.
Yeah, I prefer to think they're just like Olympic athletes and
they're just always doing crunches and shit. Yeah. To be a train guard on this planet, you need to be shredded.
Right.
Chads only.
Oh, we missed the very last shot of the movie. It's very important.
What's the last shot of the movie?
The dice. It's a close-up of the dice.
The dice, man. I forgot the fucking dice. Great. So what, though?
Dice.
What do they mean? The dice.
That's the thing, is that they're significant because of The Last Jedi.
Yes.
And then we find out why they were significant, and they're not significant to Leia.
This comes back to something that, Ryan, you talk a lot about in your videos, which is you have to know something, you have to know the quantity of either a skill or a reason for an object or the value of it before that thing is immediately important to the story. And the dice is a good example of it, where if you had seen this movie first, you'd be like, oh, there's dice shop a lot. And then if you caught The Last Jedi, you'd be like, oh yeah, there's some dice, they're back, that's interesting. But it doesn't, in this movie, the dice are nothing. They don't do, they don't do anything.
And
they
even
don't
in
do
the
it
even in the future, what do they mean? So when Luke shows up, he gives the dice to Leia, right? And they're her dead husband's lover's thing. Why is that connection? Why does that mean something to her?
Maybe she doesn't know about Kira.
That's fair enough.
But also, in that scene, isn't the purpose to let Leia know that he's not really there, because they're fake, they're a Force ghost object. It's to let Leia know that he's not really there without letting the others know, because then they won't sell the illusion of him being there, whilst also trying to trick us, the audience, into thinking he's really there.
I don't know, that whole thing is really wobbly, because Kylo picks up the dice later, and if they were imaginary, if they were just illusions, then he couldn't have picked them up. They didn't really figure out exactly how they wanted that Force illusion, how they wanted it to work.
Yeah. But look, the dice,
really
they do
too
not.
much.
Yeah.
The dice.
The dice. I don't know what we're going to call this series, but it's certainly not going to be involving dice, because dice aren't fucking relevant. God,
Imagine calling the podcast The Dice.
Why the dice or something, yeah.
Right, imagine people trying to know, this is a solo podcast.
This is a solo podcast, yeah. Yeah. Did you have anything else, Darth?
Well, no. I think we're good. I've got most of my stuff checked off.
Right. I've got a whole other 3 pages of notes that we didn't talk about, but that can be for another time. Look, this has been a wild journey through the land of Solo, a Star Wars story. I almost called it Solo, a Solo story, and that's not what it's called. Yeah, I think we've summarized our thoughts pretty well. It's a movie that I really enjoy. After about the first 25 minutes, it's pretty good, and there's a lot of stuff in it that is great. But I think the total cumulative effect of misfiring on a lot of those smaller things means that this thing just it had the potential to be extremely good and is ultimately pretty bland and uninteresting, and that's probably a bigger crime than swinging and missing, in my opinion. I feel like I've been saying that for years, but I do think taking risk is important in storytelling. It's how you get good stuff done, and it's a shame that Disney, Star Wars Disney at least, their goal is to protect these characters, not to tell good stories, and that sucks. And we should talk about that more and make it part of the thing that we do in Media Crit. And so I feel like across this 12 or so hours of recording that hopefully that's come through. But yeah, if you enjoyed this and you want to help support us, you can support us on Patreon, patreon.com/zeroindent. There are other ways to support us as well. If you like it and you watch the video, subscribing to us on YouTube, leaving a rating wherever you find it. If you like the kind of stuff we make, you'll probably like my novels. You can find them at maynardtrick.com. Danielle, where can people go to find you on the internet?
Yeah, you can find my work over at levelstory.net, which is a magazine about story and video games. Or you can head over to my personal website, which is thisisdanielle.net.
Cool. Love it. Go check it out. Level Story is a video game magazine, so if you like the way that we talk about things, I guarantee you will love it. Darth, where can people find you on the internet? Where can they check you out?
I am on the YouTubes under the name Darth, which is DARTH''D. I am attempting to upload once a week right now, but I probably want to get back to the longer videos that I've been more known for, and those are more like once a month, so we'll see. Maybe if I could start hiring out some writers, it would go a lot faster. Hint, hint, hint.
I love it. Nothing like a sales pitch at the end of a 12-part series. Rye, where can people find you on the internet?
You can also find me on the YouTubes. It's Ryebold, RYEBOLD. I do not have an upload schedule. I do stuff whenever I can think of something to say and can think of how to say that in a somewhat coherent manner.
Love it. Go check all of their content out. It's all incredible. It's the reason I got everybody involved. If you want to read more stuff like this, we have tons of articles on zeroindent.com, or you can go and check out Level Story. I highly encourage you to subscribe to both Ryebold and Daft. They both make really interesting videos about this sort of thing, so go check it all out. Otherwise, thank you for listening and sticking around to the end. Thank you guys for joining in and being part of this conversation. Didn't know that we would get this far into it and become one with Solo, a Star Wars story, but we have, and we've created a nice little micro universe here. So hopefully we'll get together again in the future and talk about something, I'm sure. But in the meantime, it's been very, very enjoyable for me. And we hope that, wherever you found this, if you think someone would enjoy it, send it to them, or let these guys know that you enjoyed having them on the podcast. It really does go a long way just to hear some feedback. So appreciate you all with your time and your energy, whether you're listening, whether you're sitting in the room with us right now. It's been very enjoyable. So we'll catch you guys in the next project, whatever that looks like.
Thanks for watching this episode of Too Much Cowboy. You have our patrons to thank for this series. Big shout outs to Cameron and you Poomans, our top Patreon supporters. You can join them by heading to patreon.com/zeroindent and contributing to our independent media publication. If you'd like to see more from us or more of this show and you're listening on the Too Much Cowboy podcast feed, you can either head to youtube.com/zeroindent or look up Backtrack Behind the Creators wherever you find your podcasts to listen to more.